Hello everyone! Right then, so what fun do we have today? We have lots of fun going on. What is going on? Ooh, yes. Right. So, hello everyone! How are we all doing? Hello Jack Ray. Jack Ray, my mother thinks you're trying to get on her good side, but we'll leave that to one side. Yeah. So leaving that to one side. Jack, hello. Mark, hello. Christopher, hello. History Vanguard, hello. Blackburn Maxwell's, hello. Peter Dawson, hello. Byron Newman, hello. Steve Clarke, hello. Mark Harkness, hello. Ronan, hello. John Shea, hello. History Vanguard, hello. Hello, Michael Gooch, hello. Carl Gasberg, hello. Ronan, hello. Hello, Stafford, hello. George Newman. Hello, Albazuski. Hello, Wayne. Hello, Atros Verdun. Hello, Bob Fry. Hello, Rapid Razorback. Hello, everyone. Right then, so, hello, Glinthred. Hello, Steve Clarke. Hello, Yickers. Hello, everyone. Hello, DG40. So, hello, John Evans. Goodness gracious me, John. It's, hello, Bugger8829. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? So, sorry I'm running a little bit late, but basically, there are two annual things that happen before I go away. One of them is that I need to do a lot of recording. A lot of recording, and I've got 4 videos left to record before I go. 2 I've written up. One I'm redoing completely, which is the one on the Warhammer 40k, and the Midway, Building the Fleets of Midway video, which honestly I'd left for this week because I thought I'll get everything else done and then I'll just spend a week doing that and it'll be lovely. And now I'm going, fudge! But I will get it all done. It will all be done before I go. I've got 4 days before I leave. And my aim is to get every single one of those videos done. I'm going to be hoarse. Yes, there are a lot of videos. You might have noticed that there have been a number of premieres have started to sort of appear up on the time thing. And I do apologise because at the moment I haven't figured out a way. There's one coming up which is on the guns, which I did in UAD, and when I put through the sound thing, for some reason the sound has... I put it through the sound enhancement that I put these things through now to try and pick up my voice and get it better, because for some reason when I do it live it's okay, but when I do it recorded, it records me as quieter than I actually am. I have no idea why it records differently than it broadcasts live. I do not know. But leaving that to one side, and all the joys of that to one side, I have some software I now run all the things through to check the sound. It's cheating, I know, I should do it manually, but my manual sound activation skills for videos, etc., are not that great. However, saying all that, it seems to have picked out the gun noises a little bit more than my voice on that one, so when the guns go boom, my voice goes a little bit quieter. But you can still hear my voice, so it's okay. But, just a heads up and on. Yes, I did know you were still catching on keyshapes. Book plug. Oh. Right. Let's see. Oh, good lord. How's it got going on? Yes, very busy, Dr. Alex. Happy Memorial Day weekend to the American friends, yes. My goods, 1 or 2. So far we've learned that the interval RN told the occasional Porky, these sloops are limited to 20 knots, NARODs are slow, this is not an aircraft carrier. Yeah. Then your Lutyens video revealed the Germans going, OMG, they lied about the R-class range. Weren't there any other R&Ds which you know about? Let's put it this way. It wasn't so much the Royal Navy lied about the R-class range. It's that the Germans presumed the Royal Navy wouldn't have done anything to improve or maintain the range, and that therefore their R class would only have a maximum operating range from the things of 1,000 nautical miles. And basically, the German intelligence didn't believe the Royal Navy when they said our ship can do X. The Germans didn't believe the ship could do X. They believed it could do Y, and the Germans turned out to be wrong, and the Royal Navy turned out to be able to do Z, which was slightly better than X, which itself was slightly better than Y. So basically, the Germans took what the British claimed and took stuff off it, because they said the British must be over-claiming, and it turned out the British were under-claiming, just a tad. Because it turned out, it's one of those amazing things, the amount of British ships which turn out to be able to accommodate more fuel than they're supposed to under the treaty. It's just, who would have thunk it? There's all these extra spaces you can put more fuel. It's just amazing. Yeah. How many recorded key ship series will be around 20 minutes? It's easy to answer how many will be around about an hour and 20 minutes. See what, the data on the RN suspect asked why would a Rodney with worn out engines be capable. The Germans claimed it was doing 26 knots. Engineering stability point. It's not a maximum. What if instead of the R class, the Treasury Department was forced to find a Queen Elizabeth successor class with small true boilers of 8 ships? Well, that would not been a catchy thing, because it would have been we want 8 small tube boiler ships. So that would have been we want 8 and we won't wait. Would be we want 8 small true boiler ships and we won't wait, which is not really as catchy. But if they had, then there would have been 8 28 knot battleships built. I doubt. At that point, there is a wonder which I would be surprised if they stopped them to build the battle cruisers, because whilst Fisher might dream of building battle cruisers, being able to start getting an entire battle line of 28 knot battleships, entire squadron, would not be a bad thing. Be kind of useful. There's a chat. Okay, I've got to catch up with what Wayne's saying. Ron, don't people understand the British national trait is understatement and sarcasm? Probably is. Run the charity? Which charity is this? Amazowski, managed to do some book moving today. All my history books now occupy my desk and shelves, while science fiction and fantasy reads and Selenium and Unity stuff have all their own dedicated shelves, including full expanse series. Interesting. Next year's big project. I'm honestly deciding, because there's part of me which is tempted to do aircraft carriers. This part of me which is tempted to do frigates, mainly because I can do all the Age of Sail ships. And there's part of me which is tempted to do small ships. I'm going to decide. I'm going to decide. At the moment I'm doing the key ship series for the technology stuff, so the individual ship profiles. And yeah, I have the options. I have enough options now. I've worked out enough years. I've fleshed out. I've done what I said I wasn't going to do, and I've fleshed it out till 2033. So I've got 10 years worth of groups. I just have to decide which order I'm going to do them in. The charity to build full-scale working copies of the Swordfish and Black. You joke about this, but actually, we've got a full scale. We've of course got an original Swordfish still flying, but building a brand new one is tempting. But actually, I know someone who would actually be up for running that. There is a guy called Steve George, and if anyone wanted to give him the money and told him to do it, he would love that, because he's a retired Royal Navy engineer and he would absolutely love doing that one. And Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm engineer. I would also say, and this is something I'm going to give you all a bit of a heads up about, because it seems very important to mention, is that basically from June the 1st to July the 2nd, so from the 2nd of June to the 1st of July, there is going to be a recorded video scheduled for every single day at 7 o'clock. Lives are going to be interesting as to when they come out. And remember, if we do lives from ships, we usually do them on Drax channel, because that gets some more attention, and that's what we're going for. So we'll do that, and yeah, it should be fun. Remember, what are the designs for next year's big project? Well, the other big project next year's big trip. We're probably going to keep it European, because honestly, I need to be organising it with someone who in the same time zone as me. I loved Canada, was lovely. Australia is going to be lovely, but I'd like a year of actually having a peaceful, fairly easy to organise in terms of actual arrangements with people. Because the trouble with Australia is, you basically send an email and then they respond, and the response comes in the next day, so you then respond, and it's constantly a case of emails going back and forwards almost every other 12 hours, and it's almost a 24-hour loop to get back to respond, sort of between these things. So as much as I've loved organising Australia, and I do the bureaucracy and organisation of all the trips, next year it's going to be, well, we'll decide. There is a temptation to do Japan, but that's going to cost money. And we think we'd like to do a slightly cheaper trip next year, because we'd also like next year to possibly do a conference, and that's what we're going to be hopefully laying on. So if we're doing a big conference as well, we don't want to exactly do a massive trip as well at the same time. And so our plan is to do the trip and then come back and do the conference, and use sort of the trip to highlight the conference coming. My current planning is Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Poland, and possibly Germany. Which would be spread over roughly 3 weeks. Because it works out at 7, and roughly 2 days in each, with a day's travel in between. Roughly. Yes, Lynn, but I think you're kind of scheduled in more detail than I am. I am worked out, and I've got basically the sets of years, and I have their weekly topic, their Tuesday videos were organised. That's it. And some idea from special Friday series, etc. No, there will be lives. It's just there will be the recorded videos, but also there's 2 reasons why there will be lives. One, this is going to sound terrible, but you get And if I'm being brutally honest, I need to do lives because financially they're a part of my. They generate more money than the recorded videos. So yeah, it's a case of you have to do the lives are a part of it, but also the lives are going to be a little less scheduled because it's going to depend on the timing of which time zone I'm in, what I'm doing at that time, and where I am, and what the internet link is going to be like. And also, some of them are going to be roundups on my channel, which are basically going, oh, this is what we've done today, this is what we're doing now. Sometimes it's going to be me wandering around on my own. Because what we're doing very much is we've got the trips at the sort of days planned, but we've also got sections planned, like sort of afternoons, etc., when we're able to wander off on our own and do our own thing, and get, for want of a better phrase, a bit of time apart so we can go and do our own individual stuff, because that's helpful. We are individuals. We get on well together. Please don't take this any other way than that. But it kind of becomes... one of the things we did notice in Canada was after about a certain amount of days, we needed to have our own timeouts and go off in our own spaces and just sort ourselves out. Because we're used to... Well, let's put it this way. I'm used to working in this office quite a lot on my own, or wandering around the country on my own. And then I'm wandering around with company the whole time. And they're lovely, but it's... I need that alone time. And so does Drac. And Dan also cherishes occasionally a bit of alone time. And Gareth basically goes off and chases cats. He really does. He goes off and chases cats. Don't tell Napoleon this, but that's what he does. So that is... function into the whole planning. I thought the plan was to build a third rate in Denner Tribal. We'd like to build all those things. -1. Has everyone heard about the Panama Canal problems? Oh, there's problems in both the Panama sewers and all sorts of places going around. Jonathan, what if, as part of the funding the UK gave to shipbuilders in the 1900s, the prize of them being converted into auxiliary cruisers, the Olympic class had a torpedo defence system installed? That'd be wonderful, but they'd had to come with a torpedo defence system at the time, and they didn't really have one. Language, Europe. A series of videos on, this is the port the RM bombarded, burned, otherwise despoiled, and here's how it happened, and why. Yep. What's the time lapse if you do a live show? That's going to be an interesting thing. You know, what's the time going to be differential to my normal lives? It depends on where it's going to be. So basically, I will put out, and I will schedule it. You will get a beep. I will give you about sort of, let's say, half an hour's notice probably, and then I'll do a live from someplace. And it might not be a long live, it might be just a case of, here I am, here's the ship, da-da-da-da-da. But it'll be a live. I have also today, I have to say, rebuilt a whole section of building, so I think I'm cramming in quite a lot into the last week before I go, or the last 4 weeks before I go. Gareth of Brit, time difference in Australia makes lives tricky. It does make lives interesting. Tanks or cats, either works. You say tanks or cats, Garius. It was cats every time. We're in Canada. I have this good story, okay? So, we're in Halifax Harbour, right? We are looking for poutine. Well, we are. We were looking for poutine because we were going to try it. Because everyone told us we needed to try it. I'm sorry I wasn't the biggest fan of it, honestly. But it would look very nice. It just didn't suit me. But Gareth, walking along, goes, "Kitty!" and disappears off. And that was before the guy with the very interesting pets appeared on the. What was it? They were ferrets, and then we lost Drac. We lost Drac completely at that point. It was fun. And it was okay. And poor Dan was having to deal with three of us because there's me who disappears off for dogs, Gareth who disappears off for cats, Drac who disappears off for ferrets, and Dan sitting there going, "We said we were going for food! Food!" So, Richard, if you do a conference, can some of us attend? That's the idea. The plan would be to do a big conference and to have it open to everyone. Have it open and have the tickets and everything open to everyone and have things working out so that people who've already maybe are part of Shipshape already get at a reduced rate or get it for free. We're still working all these things out, but we have plans for a really big naval history conference. Basically, we're going naval history version of Chalk Valley if we can make it. Remember, aren't the Grums honestly not tribals? Mm-hmm. It's fun. I've wanted to help Japan for a couple of years. It's a lot easier to travel than it looks, but I have a lot more language. That would be very, very greatly appreciated. We've got a couple of people who are lined up, but ideally we want at least about 3 or 4 of us, if people want to come along, who will be there as translators. And if we've got, then it guarantees we have them. We have a very nice guy who's done his PhD at Oxford and who teaches in... Actually, we'll be meeting him next year. If we do the Baltic states and the Baltic and Scandinavia, like I'm planning for next year, we'll be meeting up with him on the way. Because he's going to be basically one of our big assistants in Poland. Because he speaks about 7 languages fluently. I'm not sure if that qualifies him as a polyglot, but it certainly does in my book. And honestly, as he's working out there and teaches out there, he's a great one for us to meet up in Poland and help us with that. Now, there goes Eva. I'm always imagining how cool World War I Mediterranean naval campaign with Italy on the side of Central Powers. Wonder if the Italians would do worse or better than World War II counterparts. They'd certainly have an easier time fighting the French. I think the more problem is that they have a problem in that their supply line is completely dependent upon British imports. And a lot of their ships would break down to the point of not working fairly quickly. It's one of the things you have to realise is that we often talk about Britain, Italy and Japan being interesting located. Britain was fine with them as long as they were at level of they were relying on Britain for a healthy amount of their supplies for their ships. I.e., Britain would happily supply these as long as, of course, you were fighting anyone but Britain. And Britain always did supply them as long as you were fighting anyone but Britain. And that's basically the criteria. So that makes Britain feel very confident and safe with you. I was asking, does the cat chaser secretly know Mrs. Razorback? Possibly. Never doubt, Garius. I was asking, Poland, do you say, guess need to plan the exit holidays in Gdynia? Well, yeah, we'll be putting up details. Our plan is to advertise the next trip far, far more advanced than we had previously. And honestly, I'm tempted to. It's going to be a case of it's going to be 2 to 4 days in every place. The minimum is 2 days, because we need at least 2 days down there of travel in between. Hello, engaging strategy. Yeah, the Panama Canal is fresh water. That does cause issues. They'd have to set up a desalinization plant with all sorts of facilities to deal with the salt water before they could use it in the Panama Canal, and even then it wouldn't be great. You need to have a full balancing and treatment of it. Tech Team 26. If Princess Royal and Lion had been converted into carriers with Argus and Eagle being disposed of instead, the Iron would have gained 2 faster and more capable ships for World War II. Okay, yes, I agree. Okay, is that the question? I would agree. If you convert Princess Royal and Lion, you have a much faster... yeah, definitely bigger than Argus. Broadly speaking, bigger than the Eagle as well. It would be faster and it would be interesting. It would have certainly had a bigger effect on the Royal Navy. Flag was 704 feet. Courageous was 786 feet in length. Honestly, you could have done stuff still. It would still have been fairly decent. It wouldn't have been as long, but it wouldn't have been a bad either. I would have to say I agree with Glyn. I'm never writing more slowly does not necessarily increase the quality. You have to pace your writing at. I tend to do a lot of research, and then I write it all out, and it gets written in a tremendous bump. And suddenly you'll be talking to me, and I'm going to go, I've got 4,000 words done, and you're sort of going, Alex, you need to get 60,000 words done. It'll be fine, And then you'll turn around and come back to me a couple of weeks, and I'll go, yeah, I'm now at 40,000 words done. And sort of look at me and go, but how? Well, the last 3 days I'd finished my research, had all my notes written up, and then I just started writing. And I just followed my notes and bounced from point to point and wrote it as I went. So I spend a lot of time researching, prepping, organising. Basically, it's kind of like how I cook. I prep everything beforehand, make sure everything's prepped, and then when I'm cooking, I can just literally chuck it in as the process goes, and the cooking itself is actually quite neat and quite quick. It's the prep time that I sort of spend the time on. They wouldn't replace Hermes. Hermes is a brand new build ship, so they would replace Argus and Eagle maybe. You could make the case of replacing Argus and Eagle. I don't think you can make the case of replacing Hermes. Spotsky, hi from Chicago. Here is a what if. In 1940, there was talk of sending Yorktown to the Asiatic Fleet. Would Japan attach a carrier from Kido Butai to Hunter? Would she have worked with 4C? Okay, let's put it this way. If she survives the attack on the Philippines, and she could well withdraw and fall back on 4C, in which case they would probably be pulsing forward to meet her rather than going where they went and did with what historically happened. And yes, they could work together, but the question is going to be linking them up. Would they detach a carrier from the Kido Butai to hunt up? Probably not. Because sending a single carrier after a carrier is not a good idea. You'd have to send multiple carriers. And the moment you start sending a pair of carriers away from the Kido Butai, you'll weaken the strike significantly. Excuse the friend. Sorry, excuse the burp. Yeah, Tech 10, but you won't convert. Hermes is a brand new build ship. Hermes is built for a different reason than the others are. Hermes is built to see how small they can build a ship and how efficient it can be built. How efficient you can build how efficient a new build is versus a converted carrier. So you're not going to get Hermes cancelled, and you wouldn't want to. With visiting Japan, you would have to be careful on the Cat Island, Cat Island, or you might not be able to leave. No, we go, but we also bring a taser for Gareth. Gareth, if you're still on here, you can nod if you agree with us bringing the taser for you. If you're not on here, Napoleon can nod if he agrees with us bringing a taser. Engaging strategy. Alright, an interesting what if. Derived in part from the Iron and the Eastern Waterfront. How does the Pacific War go if Italy remains neutral and there is no Mediterranean theatre? Butterflies. Then you are dealing with a very interesting scenario, because at that point you turn certain things on their head. The Queen Elizabeth class are joined with the King George V's in terms of the force waiting in the home. So the upgraded Queen Elizabeths are probably sitting in Scapa Flow along with the King George V's. You probably have the unenhanced Queen Elizabeths sitting in the Mediterranean fleet as insurance there, and you'd probably have Nelson and Rodney perhaps sitting in the Far East, because they would be considered quite a good deterrent. You'd also have not to have to worry about carrier deployment in the Mediterranean, so you wouldn't have those losses, etc. So Illustrious Indomitable wouldn't be hunted where they are, but you also wouldn't have the experience in the Mediterranean fleet, which has helped drive up the development of naval aviation. You'd also the RN would probably also deploy some of its carriers to the Far East to protect them. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nelson, Rodney, Ark Royal, probably Eagle, found themselves in the Indian Ocean as the core of the Indian Ocean fleet. And the reason they put the fleet in the Indian Ocean is then it's an insurance if the Italy does go nasty, but it's also an insurance against the Far East in conflict. And again, with the RN having Queen Elizabeth, Warspite, Valiant, King George V, Renown, Repulse, and Hood. Probably Renown and Hood, because Repulse will probably be sent to be the Far East as well, with Rodney and Nelson. Plus Illustrious, Victorious, etc. for the home fleet needs. You'd have a fairly decent force. You also wouldn't have, in the nicest way, certain battles would not have the same same scenario as they did. If you have that level of force, you can maintain quite capable, quite fast groups sitting out in the North Atlantic, ready to catch certain fleets. It's usually logistics. Rinon, what happens if the treaties define battlecruisers with a 50 to 60% ratio to battlecruisers? What would be the distinguishing characteristics be between the two types? Speed, guns, armor, range? They usually have the same guns. They don't have the same level of armor coverage. So it'd be density. You'd have to talk about hull density. That's what you'd have to go, hull density. And that's a nightmare to try and work it out. But also you could set in rules that battleships can't be designed to exceed a certain amount of speed, whereas battlecruisers can be. Thanks, Elfgoff. Would the Lexington serve as a template? Potentially. Potentially, as the Americans would try and use them as a template, but I think the Royal Navy would push Hood to be the template for the battlecruisers. Which could be very interesting. Cool, Count Gasberg. A Hungarian YouTube channel uploaded 6 courses about about Danube shipping from and before the Romans to current day in Hungarian. Cool. Maximus, with the 10 to 7 ship treaty, what would the ship numbers be for Italy and France? They're in the videos. I did work through what Italy and France would probably get. If basically I worked it out as based on their sort of I rounded up theirs. So if we go to the Equitable Treaty series, Equitable Treaty. I've possibly backed this up, in which case I'm going to be annoyed. So I'm going to be on here. Equitable Treaty. Documents. Yeah, I put all that in the treaty videos. Any good recommendations for alternate history books? Not really. Some are very good, and some are not. Bernard Cornwall does tend to do fairly good, decent ones. Are you using speech-to-text software? No. I have that. I have Dragon, naturally speaking, whatever. I use it occasionally, but I don't really find it good for writing. What I find it useful for, and I do use it for, is turning, when I'm making notes, when I'm reading a piece of book, I will go right on page 68 and read out the quote, which I want to use. No, John Shea, no, my Japanese friend who did his PhD in Oxford and teaches in Poland and Lithuania can speak can talk to 7 different languages at the same time. And I've seen him do it, actually. In that he was holding 7 different conversations with people speaking different languages at him. John Taff, converting the cats would be better than Eagle, but not as good as Fisher's conversions, although Argus and Eagle were much more suited to ASW carrier work, largely due to lesser capability. I mean Argus and Hermes. Eagle was always a fleet carrier. Don't worry, it's fine. It's me cooking. I was talking about today. Today was actually quite nice. We, as a family, we cooked roast pork between us. It's very nice. My sister had a very important job. She did the gravy. Take care, Glenn. Enjoy your food. Gary, Japan has trained. Bigger distraction than us. Yes, that's going. The trouble is for poor Dan is that's going to distract both of us. Sure, if Yorktown goes to the Asiatic fleet, then you probably have a few more cruisers and a few more modern destroyers. The interesting question for me is who you see commanding it, and it might actually be Nimitz. No, it wouldn't be Nimitz. It wouldn't be Nimitz. It would probably be... Honestly, I could see Halsey getting it, not Nimitz. They wouldn't want to get... Nimitz is being kept back for a reason. He's not going to be deployed there. Because FDR's pegged him as his man. FDR's tried to give him the Pacific Fleet about 3 times by this point. John South, we'd all love that. Tech team, you have to remember, Eagle, Argus, Hermes were all being built and entering the service before the treaty limitations came in, so they're factored into it. So in the nicest way, if you've built those ships, they're in it. And the other thing is, experimentals, as most of the early British carriers were considered, the British can get away with a lot with those. They can get away with a lot of the experimentals. Next round, let's answer questions. What are these wood possibilities in response to? Wood probabilities. pretty much any question you want to have, you want to talk to me about, ask. Today is, I was going to do books, but honestly, I have spent the day recording, and I did a live on Twitch, which was a lot of fun. But I have spent the day and yesterday recording, poring over books, recording, poring over books, recording. I've been doing it the last 3 weeks solidly to make sure I got all the videos ready for before I go. I fancied a bit of a break, so I thought I'll do an alternate history video, Bruships. Thank you, Garius, for answering the question. The history of Vanguard content creation is very much optional. Just off. Interesting what if. What if the Italian attack on the Austro-Hungarian fleet after it was given to Serbs had failed and Yugoslavia had been able to keep those ships? Well, I think in the nicest way that Italy might not be enjoying itself in World War II. I think there could be all sorts of issues for it in World War II. Hard Tobias, thank you. You did catch your Bruships. Do you have any recommendations of books about Operation Bumblebee that produced the SAM2 Lark, Rim Terrier, Rim 8 Talos, and Rim 24 Tata? Not at the moment, because the last book I read about it I really wouldn't recommend, but there is a good one coming, I'm told. Because one of my friends is writing one. So they wrote a very good book about mine warfare, so I can't see they'd be too bad at writing about missiles, because they're very good at understanding the technicalese of ordering and the construction design, that sort of scenario. Karen, to steal a phrase from the Russians, Hermes was a mobilization design for a longer World War One. Yep. Spotsky, one more Yorktown question. Had she not been damaged at Coral Sea, how much of a better chance would she have had of surviving at Midway? Look, Midway is... And I've been doing this a lot. Okay. We met at the conference this week some very cool people. We met the people who make this and Rule the Waves Free and all sorts of games. This one they gave to us. And I can tell you honestly that putting those scenarios through those games, you learn very quickly that Midway is not the normal outcome of Midway. That result is that good about one in every... It's about every 40-45 times almost. It's very, very hard to replicate a result of that caliber. So, yeah, the odds are you lose a ship. To be fair, the dragon, naturally speaking, is actually fairly decent with my accent and me pronouncing old English words and sometimes things even in a foreign language. It usually gets fairly right. Mostly it has issues with when it tries to do Americanized spelling of things, but other than that, okay. Alright, here's what if the Kriegsmarine surges Bismarck, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst and Eisenhower together with a proper screen once at sea, they scatter into 4 surface groups. How does the RN respond? Ah! Literally. Screaming. Pain, crying, gnashing of teeth, begging their mummies. No, seriously, how does the RN respond? They basically they divide probably their force into 2, and they hunt down 2 task groups at a time, knowing that each of their groups has enough strength to take on any two task groups should the Germans reform. Could it be supplied by sub? Not really. So, hello, Leslie Mitchell. I mean, I'm eating chocolate brownies. I should not be. I wish I was eating chocolate brownies. I've run out of food in here. I've also run out of Pepsi, and I'm running close on running out of Iron Brew. And I don't want to really restock because I'm leaving at the end of this week, and I don't want to. I would like to turn the fridge off before I go. So you know, I've got that going on. But yeah, it's a case of I'm hungry. Plains Fox, Frank Fletcher? Not sure who you're talking about. Right then. What if Okay. Hello, what if HMS Queen Mary is not destroyed at John South? What if HMS Queen Mary was not destroyed at Jutland, and thus no panic over armored RM battlecruisers? Would the animals be built without delay to the original 36,000-ton design, and how 36 not design? How useful that would be? Yes, more likely. And would it be more? How useful would that be? Well, you'd have 4 of them in service at the end of when it's treaty time. So the RN would probably go. We'll be keeping all 4. We'll keep all 4 Admiral class battle cruisers. They probably actually. This is one of the things. Okay, so here's what the RN might do. They might go. We'll keep all 4 admirals. We'll keep both Renowns, and so we'll run 6 battle cruisers. We'll keep all 5 Queen Elizabeths, all 5 Rs, and we also want 2 16-inch ships under the treaty, so that we can have a battle cruiser squadron of 6 vessels and 2 battle squadrons of 6 vessels, and that's our fleet. At which point the Americans will be turning around and going, no, it needs to be divisible by 5 because we want to have a 5-to-3 ratio. In which case you could end up with 20 ships, where you probably would end up keeping Tiger and a King George, probably a King George V, probably a KGV as well, or maybe the RN. Good lord, if they allowed the RN to build 4 new ships, that would just cause panic. The RN would love it. They'd end up with 2 7-ship battle squadrons and a 6-ship battle cruiser squadron, which they probably divide. They probably send 3 of those battle cruisers to go and operate in the Indian Ocean and keep 3 in the home fleet. They'd keep 6 of the battleships. They'd keep 1 of the battle squadrons in the home fleet and put 1 in the Mediterranean. So that'd be how they deployed them around the world. So you'd have 3 battle cruisers sitting in the ocean, 7 battleships sitting in the Mediterranean, 7 battleships sitting in the home fleet, and 3 battle cruisers sitting in the home fleet. Matthew Meek, hello. Morgan Mackenzie, hello. NHT7040, hello. Tobias Geoffrey, hi. Hello. Gregory Wake, hello. Anna Jellicoe, hello. Josway, hello. WS Swordsman, hello. Charles Curtis, hello. RG, hello. Jack Ray, thank you for gifting all the memberships. Melanie dodged. Melanie, you keep dodging memberships. Hello, Jay Bennett. Drunon. Second treaty question. What if USN and IJN had built similar levels of experimental tonnage as the RN? That would have caused panic. I think that would cause as happened when the Japanese built a cruiser, an aircraft carrier which was under 10,000 tons. I have a feeling the Americans would have been sufficiently motivated; they'd have wanted to redefine what experimental was. Shermack. In 1940, would it? It could be. Since Nimitz' biggest objection was he wasn't senior enough, Asiatic fleet to Pacific fleet is a pretty natural path. I don't know if Halsey would get an independent command as opposed to a task force. It seems logical to me that the FDR will put someone who's groomed for high command. Well, there's already an Asiatic fleet. There's already a commander out there. So Halsey would be taking the carrier group out under that command. Will be transferred to that fleet command. So that's why I would say it would be Halsey. They gave us command. This one is command. Modern operations, and it is well, you always know it's going to be a good game when it comes with four DVDs and a Steam deck password. and all sorts of serial numbers, and the whole system is basically set up. Yeah, this is full. This is every single detail you can get from Slytherin software. It's fun. Thankfully, I do have a CD drive and DVD drive on my computer, because when I built it with them. My God, thinking about it, since you started the YouTube channel, how's your presenting style changed? Lessons learned since you started? Best, most fun moment? It sounds strange. I can't really think of a best, most fun moment. I've enjoyed it pretty much all. I enjoyed all, really. Presenting style changed. I've got a lot more confident with the computers, and I'm less flustered when the computer goes wrong. I just don't bother anymore. I just keep going and work it through, and just work through the problem and just keep talking. There's no point panicking or worrying, just get it fixed. Is that a DB5 over your left shoulder? Yep, that is a DB5. It's a Lego one as well. Because one of my things I do when I go travelling around is I build Lego models. Well, the guy in command of the Asiatic fleet was already in high command, so basically you're basically replacing a senior admiral just because you're deploying a carrier. That's not going to really wash. Looking forward to refighting the Trafalgar. We are looking forward to refighting the Trafalgar. It's going to be fun. Oswalski. Shamak, argued the problem with Yorktown at Midway was the damage control was too good. The reason she got hit twice is because the second Japanese strike couldn't tell she was damaged and thought they had found a different American carrier. Yeah, but they just still hit her twice, even if they hadn't realised they hadn't thought she was a new carrier. She hadn't sunk yet, so they were definitely going to go sink her. Blackburn Maximus. If New Brunswick, PA, and Nova Scotia had similar amounts of oil to Texas, and was found late 1880s, how would this impact the logistics for the Royal Navy? With the Royal Navy having access to that much oil, I would expect, honestly, that they might have converted to oil for the fleet a lot sooner. I.e., it might well not be the Queen Elizabeth class, not the first oil powered ships. It could well be the Super Orions, the Orions, or maybe even Dreadnought herself. That's an interesting question. Dreadnought, and let's put it this way. Let's say you add everything else onto Dreadnought as it was, but you also add in it's the first oil-burning battleship, oil-fired battleship, and maybe gets a speed of up to 24 knots. That would be an interesting scenario, because that would change Dreadnought's design. An oil-fired Dreadnought would be really interesting, and that's, if it's 25 years, they could have done it. My Highness, in absolute theory, the US could have not gotten Saratoga into the Midway, but would require the full attention of someone on an overworked staff charged with doing nothing but making this happen. Someone? It would require an entire team of someone's. Why is the outcome of it Midway only about 2.2% likelihood range? Because it's a fluke. There is a number of times you run the simulations. Neither side they don't actually find each other. They don't actually have a battle at all. That's quite a significant That's what we would call a significant statistical grouping. Involves neither side finding the other and no battle at all taking place. Hi, Megascrow. As for the rest of it, Melanie, well, There are some scenarios which are sometimes less on where the Japanese get all their strikes in, and the Americans lose everything. The Japanese lose nothing. There are times when the Americans get all theirs in and don't lose anything. There are times when both sides, and this is one of the more common scenarios, again, statistically significant proportion of the time, both sides manage to annihilate all each other's entire carriers and end up engaging in a gunnery drill, which is not good for the Americans. Government, what state do you think the navies would have been in for World War II if the UK government had stalled and let the US Congress cut funding instead of going into the treaty system and giving the US Senate a shopping list? I think you would have the Royal Navy would probably be in a slightly better state overall, because despite the fact that the treaty helped them with having a minimum of amount of force they needed, considering the British government's traditional reaction to any economic crisis is to build ships as a way of employing people, I have a feeling with the 1920s as they were, 1930s as they were, it could have caused the British economy to be building a lot more ships, which would probably help British maritime industry be a lot stronger. British maritime industry is stronger, then they're going to be a far stronger place to put a build a navy. As for the US, well, they'd have probably completed their 16-inch gun ships, and I doubt they'd have got many cruisers. So they probably end up being a battleship and destroyer navy for World War II as well as World War I. But they would have the Lexingtons, they just probably wouldn't have aircraft carriers. Whereas the Royal Navy would have had aircraft carriers. The US would have been far slower to get involved in aircraft carriers without the conversion of Lexingtons. Actually, I found a Japanese soft drink which tastes almost exactly like Iron Brew. That's interesting. And disturbing found myself enjoying it. Unfortunately, it's not orange, but you can't have everything in life. No. Sensian. How realistic is an ancient era ship being blown across the Atlantic? Would a Carthaginian ocean-going vessel sturdy enough to make it? How bad were the galleys on the ocean? Okay, so some of the larger galleys. Let's put it this way. If they get blown out, and depending on the season and the weather, they could make it. The question is, are they going to have enough supplies to make it? And when they get there, will they have enough supplies to make it back? That becomes difficulty. So the thing is, the odds are they make it across. The odds are they don't make it back. But they could, again, it depends on the time of year. But if you think about the trade winds, etc., and the currents of air which go around the ocean, if a galley did find itself, for whatever reason, especially some of the Carthaginian galleys which went out along the Spanish coast, if it gets caught, let's say, well, Cape St. Vincent springs to mind. That sort of area. It could have ended up getting blown across the Atlantic. The interesting thing is whether it would get back. It's slivering software. He doesn't. If the RN had to summon the next two navies as per law, they would have 15 plus 9 equals 24 battleships. When's this? Yeah, in the 1920s and 30s they could do. It depends on how many each on that side has. Supposedly, I was thinking if Yorktown was not damaged at Coral Sea, she would have had the speed to avoid the torpedo attack that doomed her Midway. Well, she certainly could have manoeuvred. Seth Thompson, what if the RN had kept the 6-inch triple as a standard gun for its surface commanders during the Cold War? Well, it certainly provides a flexible system. It would be very useful in the very useful in the Falklands War. If you standardize on a 6-inch triple, even with upgraded modernizations and automation as they come in, etc., so basically carry the same pan as the 4.5-inch, but they've standard on the triple 6-inch. The Royal Navy probably have the most powerful deck gun of any navy in the world at this current time. But the interesting thing is, probably other navies might have kept up with it as well. Didn't get my copy of All the Way is Free, though, did you? One job, Dr. Clarke, one job. No, but you might be going to get something better than that when we get back. But we'll leave that to one side till when we get back. There's all sorts of interesting stuff which might happen when we get back, because of the connections we made. Yeah, I am making sure he gets on the plane. Seriously. He would. Ooh. I just found an extra can of 1901 I didn't know I had. Come on. Been a while since I did my Midway reading, but from memory I believe it was stated that they were supposed to find Enterprise and Hornet. That's certainly what they were hunting for. Does anyone else see Gareth the Brit's comment, Japan has trained, big distraction, to be honest, constantly slide to the bottom of the chat, or is it just me? I haven't seen that happening elsewhere, so I'm not sure how that's happening. Have you pinned it for yourself? Did you like it so much you pinned it? You're fixing the steering on the riding mower. That's pretty darn important, Stafford, as I'm presuming you ride on that mower. The Japanese didn't sink Midway herself. She was only just sort of finished in time for... I don't think she ever took part in World War II combat operations, I'm not sure. From memory. Yeah, she commissioned on September 7th, 1945, so didn't. But how much for you to watch the first episode of the Kantai collection and post at least 5-minute review video of it? Send me a link. I'll have a figure out of it. Mainly because if it's what I think it is, then I will watch it. What I'll do is I will do my level best to arrange it so that me and Drac are watching it together for the first time, and you can get us watching it and our comment of it. But it might be saved for a Christmas special, because I might do it when I'm travelling, and when I don't have to use my own... How do I put this way? If I'm going to be sat watching television programs, I'm going to want to be sitting on a couch. And if I do that in my house, I love you all dearly, but mostly you will not see me. Mostly you will see the dogs on top of me. Because I love them dearly, but both do consider me their number one cushion. And I literally have been known to have the poodle on my lap and the corgi curled round my neck. Because the corgi will get up on the back of the sofa and will sit behind me, and the poodle will sit across my lap. I don't know, could they not forage and partially resupply enough to get back? there's a lot of different things you have to build for a ship. It's not just a case of food that you run out. It's not just a case of water that you run out of. It's supplies. However, here's the thing. There is the scenario that you go over there, you end up building a population with the local population, and then you send a ship back. And you end up getting trade links going. But the thing is, we've never heard about those trade links. And the thing about the Phoenicians and the... and it'd be more likely to my mind, it would be the Phoenicians than the Carthaginians who would go wandering off across the Atlantic. Mainly because the Carthaginians were more concerned with land, whereas the Phoenicians were more concerned with the sea. The Phoenicians really didn't give a flying hoot about land territories. They cared about sea routes. The Carthaginians cared about control. So Richard's nice way to answer this one is, if Phoenicians have got carving styles, got to megaliths over here and all sorts of things, I would never bet against the Phoenicians wandering around. They're kind of like the Vikings. They turn up in all sorts of random places, and we're fairly certain. We are as certain as we can be that the Vikings made it to North America. Stefan, I don't think you'd have maybe a head start on munitions, on anti-hypersonic munitions, but I think you could be putting up a massive flak wall. Something is making a weird noise off to my left. The doggos are well. German surface raiders were not ordered not to engage the RN. Do you know Hipper engaged HMS Berwick? Let's see. I have some details about that. Yeah, Berwick had issues. She did have issues. I'm not sure I would consider her thoroughly ready for combat. She scored no hits on the Emblem Hipper. Yeah. The fact that she scored no hits would suggest to me she was not thoroughly ready for combat. Despite what some might claim, so there's obviously an issue going on there, and I would want to find out what it was before I started passing judgment on a ship. No. Whilst Carthage was a Phoenician colony, that's kind of like saying that America and Britain are the same people because America started out as the 13 colonies in the United Kingdom. It's not. I have no idea where Knight is. Normally he's here asking a lot of questions. And there's Garrus, but yes, but different political and economic drivers. Carthage versus Phoenicians. Yep. Would the Roman gladius be an effective boarding weapon? Yes, it was an effective boarding weapon. They used it quite a lot for that role. No, it's not the radiator. It's the fridge. It's making a zzz noise, and I think there was something trapped in the seal. Let me just check something. What if Catherine would have been undertaken before? That's an interesting scenario. Honestly, I think myself the thing that needs to happen is well, honestly, Norway needed to be slightly more sensible. They needed to think, well, hang on, they've just invaded Denmark, let's go full alert. But they didn't. Stupidly, they thought the Germans would invade the Swedes if they invaded Denmark rather than Norway. And so they thought they'd know about it because Sweden would be invaded. And then you consider just how heavily armed Sweden was at the time, and you go, no. Oh, and unlike us, they are actually at full alert. And Sweden was at full alert and going, come closer if you want to dance. Colin, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, the phrase I would use would be for the last several hundred years, it's been important to see as a primary route to trade before invade a country. But yeah, there are people these days who think you can magically invade countries by, I don't know, just clicking your fingers and flying there. How was it? Vian and the crew of the Cossack aspire with Klingon swords and daggers. How long until the RN views them as a threat? No. The more correct question at that point is how long until the RN copies them because they like them? There is a fan running in the background. On the computer. There is a CPU fan, which shouldn't be taking up too much noise. There's also noise coming from the fridge, I think. Or alternatively, it's coming from the computer, but I cleaned the computer out yesterday, so I don't think it should be making that noise. It's been running all fine the rest of the day, so it's only just started making a noise now. I've heard the Phoenicians had colonies in Spain and probably sailed to Ireland Britain for metals. We're fairly certain they did some coastal hopping, yes. I think they might have gone further. Now that I've already opened my mouth in the interwebs, SBNs are the second strike asset, not the first strike asset. As a rule, that's what they are, yes. The whole point is they don't do sort of necessarily precision strike. They do area strike, and they are basically, you won't find them, so you can't stop them. ICBMs, and air-drop weapons are usually considered a first strike. Excellent. Honestly, if any nation did build a dreadnought, I suspect the Iron would build a dreadnought faster or build something even bigger that made the ship obsolete. See Warrior vs. Galore. That's pretty much what all that British policy is always the case. Glad the dogs are doing well. My cat has been sick since the end of the month. Fortunately, live close enough to the only college and vet medicine state hospitalised him there. He's starting to do better and eat without constant encouragement, and a large balance on my credit card. Ouch. And hope he gets well soon. Excuse me. While in Australia, would you and Drac be meeting Shadowversity and possibly doing a collab video? Perhaps to discuss they were for how castles are relevant to maritime power. We'd love to, but I haven't managed to make contact. I did send an email, but I don't know if it got through because I sent some emails in the past to Shadowversity, and and they've never had really a response. So I'm presuming they aren't getting through for some reason. So I presume I'm using the wrong email, but I keep trying because it'd be fun. Sure, wait, that's almost done assuming the Germans would invade Denmark and stop there. Yeah, I never said the Norwegian government was smart. Okay, the Norwegian people I have a lot of time for. The Norwegian government before World War II I do not have time for at all. Sweden probably wouldn't have told Norway just to spite them. Sweden would have, in the nicest way, if Germany had invaded Sweden instead of Norway at that point, the German army would have been given short shrift. The German navy would have been at the bottom of the Baltic. And World War II would have been a lot shorter. Bismarck gets away from the RN, attacks a convoy of an R-Class escort. Does she engage the R-Class or retreat? Well, she should retreat. But she might try and fight the R-Class, and in which case she's going to get beaten up even more. That's the thing. People often forget after Denmark Strait, she's damaged, okay? She's already been damaged at Denmark Strait. And frankly, Lindemann keeps vacillating as to whether or not she should be going home. And Lutyens is remembering the fact he's supposed to be doing this great operation. That was his order, was to go and engage merchant ships, and he hadn't engaged any merchant ships. Richard, did Sweden say that through the back channels or backwaters? Sweden didn't say anything through the diplomatic channels. They just mobilized. Unlike the US, who has a gun behind every blade of grass, Sweden has a gun behind every rock, and as I recall, there are lots of rocky mountains they approach Sweden. Now, let's be honest, let's be technical about this. Unlike the US, they have a gun behind every blade of grass. Sweden has a anti-tank cannon behind every rock, and artillery, and an entire artillery division behind every mountain. What? It's making that noise. It's clean still, so there's no dust. That's going to annoy me. Is that fully charged? That has fully charged. Cute. That's that one. That's the red one. Where's the one for you? There you are. Yep. Anti-tank rifles are still guns. Just because the gun fires 155mm projectile does not mean it's not a gun. No, it's just important clarification that it's that the order of pain it will deliver is an order of magnitude greater. What if HMS Incomparable was built instead of HMS Hood with working 20-inch guns? That makes treaties interesting. It makes treaties very interesting. Basically, it makes treaties functionally... Because Britain won't give it up. So you either have to write a treaty which allows it, or you have a treaty which allows everyone to have a 20-inch gun ship. Would the US still want to get in World War II if there was no Spanish-American War? Potentially. Potentially. They've still got an incredible interest in Asia, and still consider it part of their territory. See, Clarke, I agree. It's like all companies they diverge, but the drivers for expansion remain. Yes, but the drivers are different. The drivers for Phoenician was maritime sea trade. The drivers for the Carthaginians was economic control and expansion. One is mercantilist. The other one is a trader. Economy. Runon, why does it seem like most of German World War II history can be sometimes then Hitler got bored, had a good idea? Because he often gets the blame for everything, and quite a lot of the time he does deserve it, but there's times actually when it's other people, but they just put the blames on him. So Sweden allowed regulars and reservists to go on holiday with their arms to Finland in 1940 to play the Russians. Yep. Very true. Getting to talk. Hope you and your family are doing well. Thank you. They're doing well. Manus, you asked what if Stalin is long, but what if FDR survives to serve out his last term? He's still president that George Marshall had to ask stop calling Navy we in the Army Day. Interesting enough, who gets deployed to nuclear weapons? Probably still the Army Air Corps, but you never know. Honestly, I expect him to really try his best to weaken MacArthur. Because by that point, they were in a blood feud. Verdun, the geography is perfect for defense. Presuming you mean Sweden. Dick Richards, the 37mm Sabo round that only the Swedes at that time had would have stopped the early armoured columns dead in their tracks. You can say that again. And again, what if the UK follows through on the Maltese referendum and they become a full part of the UK in the late 50s? Well, that'd be kind of interesting. It would, what kind of economic impact? It would give Britain an even larger space in the Mediterranean. Probably Britain would be forced to have similar referendums for the Falkland Islands and Gibraltar, and possibly for the Channel Islands, etc. Maybe even the Isle of Man, although I doubt they'd be so keen on it. But the others might well push through. and that could change some of the sections of Britain. I think you would find it interesting is that you probably would have a lot more links built up between Britain and Malta in terms of flights, etc. You could also have had the British having to consider to being a far larger presence in the Mediterranean for any during the Cold War, so that could have affected British naval forces and naval strengths. Be an interesting scenario to go through and work through. What kind of refit would HMS Comparable have seen if she was built? Every refit. She'd be the most modern. She'd be the most modernized ship the Royal Navy could modernize. Everything they could stick on her, they would. Some more history hits in this. Saw a comment suggesting turning the RMS Titanic into a four dual 15-inch guns with 10-inch belt battleship, and then put it at Jutland, where it managed to sink Karlsruhe. Why? 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 Okay. But what's the question? Actually, yes. The RN at the time in the industry is such that it can do it. Also, with dreadnoughts as it was look weak. Dr. Clarke suggested 30.5-inch gun dreadnoughts, for instance. Yep. That's the thing. The RN. Let's say the RN goes all out in 1905. And especially under the scenario we were talking about with the oil earlier. The RN could have built an HS Dreadnought with 13.5-inch guns. They could have built it with oil-powered, steam turbine, 24, 25, possibly a 24 knotter, probably more than anything else. And yeah, that's going to be a very scary. That would set a whole new standard for Dreadnought. But again, if the Operation Sea Lion was successful, how? Okay. Under what? There is an R-class plus destroyers sitting in Plymouth. There are Nelson and Rodney with destroyers and cruisers sitting up the Firth of Forth. Any German force in Sea Lion is going to get smashed between those two, and that's before you get any other forces that are going to be called in and taking part. And there's torpedo boats, and there's aircraft, and there's the minefields, and then there's the Home Guard. So anything that lands is then got to fight for all that, and the regular army, and everything else. That's just not a good scenario. Okay, it's not a good scenario. But you're saying that if they manage to be successful, Germany, Ireland, and UK in numbers. Would the US get involved and try to send reinforcements to the UK? Potentially. More likely they'd try and escort Canadian reinforcements to the UK as a halfway house. So, GP, what is your favourite story about military personnel making unauthorised field modifications to their equipment, vehicles, aircraft, or ships? Probably it's the fact that the... Okay. So, usually you have a... what's sometimes called as a tractor, okay? It's a tank chassis which is modified with a special superstructure above it to, beach armored recovery vehicle to push landing craft off the beach and help with other vehicles if they get stranded on the beach. Okay? So, in the 1980s, it was a big exercise. And the British Barv crews noticed that they were the only armoured vehicles without a gun on them. And they felt this was wrong. So they found some pipe, and they fitted their vehicles with a gun. Now that was, broadly speaking, annoying, and the lovely people, the poor attendant sort of stewards were and marshals were going, hang on, what the frick is going on here? But then they managed to find a system where they could use the gun to register kills. Because the gun was theoretically an 8-inch wide piece of tubing, they were kind of massacring everything. This caused a rapid re-evaluation of significant emotional events to take place. Actually, sorry, I made a comment that Japan is like Sweden in the don't invade list of forested mountains and realised the conversation moved on. Hadn't lead a second comment. No worries. What would Japan's response be to Encarol? I would assume some kind of Superman auto. No, it'd be some kind of, well, pick about probably number 13 battleship, something like that. NHT 7040. That would have been Jack Ray who's given you membership, because that's the sort of thing Jack does. He's very generous, very kind. That was my response to Battleship Titanic as well. Hospital ship like a sister, or troop transport. Yeah. Hello, hello, Alexi. Sure, any what if that starts out with sea line is successful is historical fantasy. There is so much hand waving we need to make happen for sea line to work. So much hand wavium. It's just, at a certain point, you're no longer doing sea line. You've invented a whole new operation. Sea line was tested by Professor Paddy Griffiths in 1970s using veterans. It failed multiple times. World War II English Home Guard. 1/3 of, well, actually, I'd say the whole of the Home Guard. Frankly, some of my family members in the Scottish sections of the Home Guard were equally as creative. Honestly, Scotland was not a good place to go. I would not have invaded Scotland if I was any part of the German forces. World War II English Home Guard. 1/3 of what became the Geneva Convention. Soak the beach in fuel, let the enemy land, light it. To my mind, still one of the harshest battle tactics there is. You've missed out a point. Okay, they were going to soak the beach in fuel by also filling the sea with fuel. Their plan, they had pipes which went out under the water, which were going to pump the fuel up, because the fuel would float to the surface of the water, and then once they had enough fuel there and the enemy were landing in it, and basically they were going to wait till the enemy were actually offloading, were already in the oil slick water and everything was already nice and oily, and then they were going to light it. And they had various methodologies, ideas, and worked out on how to light it, from a longbowman to a actual automated system. And they tended to have methods of, how do I put this politely, of methods of making sure it lit up as quickly as they wanted it to light up. But their plan was to wait until people had started getting out of the landing craft and were wading ashore before they lit it. They were very nice people. They were probably the people you met down the street who were lovely. But remember, these were men who had been through World War One and were worrying about defending their grandchildren while they tried to escape. And you have to ask yourself, what are the things my grandparents would not do to protect me? The answer to most of those things is there isn't a lot. What if the Japanese went for the Philippines rather than bombing Pearl Harbor? The US counters and his mauled salvage us. The ocean floor is impossible. How long is the war extended? Well, the Japanese do go for the Philippines as well as Pearl Harbor, and they do wipe out pretty much the forces in the Philippines. So the thing is, if the Americans had based their fleet in the Philippines, rather than if the Japanese went for the Philippines, the Americans sent their fleet force, and then they managed to do the Quito battalions. They won. The war's probably extended by at least another 18 months to 2 years. Because that's how long it takes to build ships. So, CDP, if Operation Sea Lion was ever had any chance of success, when is the window when serious pre-war preparations would have had to begin, and how would the UK have responded? They'd have had to start planning and prepping and building the necessary ships for it in about 1935, 1934 to actually make it serious. And yeah, you're building an amphibious fleet. Britain's going to get very worried about that. You're Germany. They should have rebuilt Fusiliers and Easies into battlecruisers. Removed the familiar turrets and add boilers. And some more armour to build. That leaves more midships for more AA guns. It would be an interesting idea. David, the UK stand up a US-style Coast Guard. Is removing law enforcement and related duties beneficial to the RN? Is a UK Coast Guard conducting Caribbean or Falklands Patrol beneficial to development planning? No and no. And there's a reason for this. Okay, one, that's just going to reduce the money going into the Royal Navy. And they don't have enough money as it is. Two, that those small ships doing those operations provide vital experience for junior officers, and the Royal Navy will lose those ships and will not gain that experience. And look at what half the trouble the USN is having at this moment is because of the lack of suitable commands to let an officer go and wreck something, and it doesn't cost anything comparatively. Because let's be honest, if a River class gets dinged up versus a Type 45 or something bigger gets dinged up, it's a lot cheaper. Three, in as much as the US Coast Guard are lovely, in some of those scenarios, i.e. the Falklands, you would still need a grey presence, so you'd still have to have a warship down there. You just would be trying to spend money on 2 ships being down there instead of 1. And 3, it doesn't really benefit the British enough, because there isn't going to be enough stuff put behind it. So that's a problem. Is it you that keeps making weird noises? No, don't think so. Hang on, is it you? It's you that's keep making noises. I was thinking it was everything else, but it's you that's making the weird noises, isn't it? Ugh. Why are you making weird noises? Why are you telling me? Found out what's making weird noises. My watch had my charging watch had managed to fall down on the floor next to the fridge, and so it looked like it was the fridge making noise, but it was actually the watch had gone where it wasn't supposed to. But nice idea, Dave. Blackmail Maximus. If after Japan, Italy backed out of the Second London Treaty negotiations, the UK ditches the treaties and goes on a shipbuilding spree, could they have spam-built Vanguard reusing turrets in the R class? Yes. They could have done. And they could have probably built, let's be honest, if they do that in 1937, if you consider it constructed, they could have probably replaced 2, maybe 3, possibly, depending on the yards, and this depends again on what they do, if they pass a law that changes the law they've already made. They could possibly have reactivated some yards and possibly built more. So they could have got as many as 3 or 4 of the R class converted to vanguards by the time of World War II, and that could have been combined with the Machi pushing through about 4 King George V's could have been built in that sort of by 1939, and 4 of the Queen Elizabeths could have been upgraded, and probably both of the Renown and Pulse. So they could have done that, and they could have had 8 new ships and 6 modernized ships. Probably still wouldn't have got Hood upgraded, because there is a more limited number of yards that can do that job. Malaga, what if Hitler decided to invade Switzerland instead of Poland in 1939? Presumably on a pretense of protecting the German minority. How likely would France and Britain be to intervene? Pretty likely. And I think the Italians would intervene as well. I don't rate the German chances of success of invading Switzerland that highly. Switzerland is not a good place to invade. In September 1939, you do not have long before those valleys are actually impassable. And combine that with their predilection for having very well armed, very well organized armed forces who are very quick to mobilize and very heavily armed, with a lot of stuff hidden in caves and bunkers, etc. I don't rate it as being great at all. Sea Lion is entertaining. Let's invade with with unpowered chain-to-go barges over the channel. Yes, this is an entertaining option. If the sea doesn't get you, then it makes an interesting target for the destroyers at night when they think it's safe to cross. Destroyers at night? I'd honestly say the Home Guard would the various interesting things would be interesting. It wouldn't do to have them sitting safely on a landing craft with the burning of fuel in the water. Well, you have to remember quite a lot of landing craft are made from wood as well, so in the nicest way they're going up. They might be treated, but they're not supposed to be surrounded by oil and lit on fire. NHT-7040, the more I hear, the more I must look into the Home Guard. There's the trouble is, there's that wonderful, wonderful television program. And there's a great comedy. But people forget it's a comedy and they treat it like it's the actual thing. And it's actually a comedy. And it's a very good comedy. But it's not the reality of it. Infinite. Basically, all the jokes of Dad's army, I wouldn't want to face them. Bear in mind, if a Boer war vet is fighting you, he's an old contemptible who survived both wars. Yeah. And he's fighting again, and that, as I always point out, usually if they're doing that, they have lived in that area their whole lives as well, when they haven't been away fighting wars, so they know the area like the back of their hands. And they've got grandchildren, and they've got their mates' grandchildren, and all their friends and family who they've grown up with and seen their whole lives. They're defending. They are supremely motivated, they are supremely knowledgeable, and ain't nothing they ain't seen before. Benwicks, what names would you recommend for the Type 32 frigates? Well, seeing as the Type 32s will actually batch 2 Type 31s, They are. That's what they're going to be. I'd love to go tribal names, but I don't think I'll get them. So I'd go battle names. Yeah, let's go some battles. Trafalgar, St. Vincent. Some decent battle names. Matapan. Let's see. Let's say the Fuzo Ise battle cruiser rebuild happened, and now the IGN has now 8 battle cruisers to go to commerce. So Maggie's going to become CVs? Potentially. But that's what they become anyway. If they... It's going to sound strange. If they've... If you have to convert them because of the treaty, you're going to convert them. But that's what they're planning. But if they're building them, they won't convert the Fuzo and Ises because, well, you just get rid of them. Honestly, I think the Japanese were about to start scrubbing the ships. NHT 7040. Grandfather was in it, but he had only one story of the one lad's coming to the door with his stun gun ready. He thought the Germans invaded after a prank. Lucky he never shot them. Yep. So could at some point you do a video discussion on the contribution of blimps in any certain warfare operation in the World War II? That's mainly the Americans who do that, and I think I have done a bit of a discussion about one because one got lost. But yeah, at some point maybe. As invading Switzerland, as the PM said to the Italians, we will shoot twice. Definitely. Swiss are disturbingly well armed. The joke I've heard about the invasion of Switzerland was that they would have blown the passes and the troops would have fired single, well-aimed shots and gone home. That was what they said, and then the Italian officer, or whatever, officer said, well, our double number of troops coming, and they said, well, we fired twice then and go home. If a candidate asks World War I for shore guns to protect their harbours, do you think the UK government would have allowed them to buy licensed build 15-inch 42 and 9.2-inch 50 guns? Probably. If they'd really wanted them. I doubt the Americans have been that happy with 15-inch guns appearing on their coast, but they couldn't have really done anything about it. But how do things change if the UK kept the Anglo-Japanese lines instead of getting close to the US after World War I? Issues. It's very complicated. You have to change a lot of history for that to be the case. You have to change a lot of the history. And at that point, you are not in alternate history, you're in fantasy. Ben Weeks, do you believe the Type 32s will be actually get built based on all the uncertainty? Batch 2 Type 31s, yes. Type 32s, no. I'm sorry, no. They were called Type 32s, but it's Type 31s Batch 2s. And yes, they more than likely will get built because the yard there is pretty much already a contract for them. Because that's the requirement of setting up that second yard. Because the requirement was we had to have 2 frigate factories. Even wooden landing craft are going to provide a lot of protection from burning fuel in the sea. That wood doesn't light instantly and won't burn through instantly either. Plenty of time to set out a region on fire. Two things though, Melanie. One, who said it was plain fuel which was being put into the sea? It was a special mixture. They played with it. Two, and this is the important point. Two, There is also the amount they were planning on pumping in of their special mixture into the sea. There's a lot. A lot. I don't think we'll see a ship named BT or Jellicoe nowadays in NHT 7040. I just don't. That's right, the fuel-soaked breach. If you want to add psychological warfare, mix a certain scent into the fuel so enemy would recoil smelling it. How about pine resin into the fuel? Not a lot. I still want to see what happens if the RN announces that new HMS Camton is going to send us there on a goodwill visit. Human chain of fishing boats forms up in front of the dock. Take care, Axel. Alexei. I will go into submarine design and metallurgy hulls to the extent that I can. I think that is on the list of videos. Topics. This rate, I'm going to need a holiday to get over the trip. Seeing as I'm yawning and I haven't even gone yet. Yeah, we always feel bad Jellicoe missed out, but unfortunately with him comes BT. So, on the final sum of things, I would detest having an HMS BT more than I would like having an HMS Jellicoe. Fuel is what burns when reactive with an oxidizer. I never specified the type of fuel. It's a good job you didn't. No, yeah, they actually conducted experiments into working out what's the best type of fuel. That was what really scared the British Army, because there was apparently they were invited along to to where they were testing and developing it, and they found they put dummies and dummy boats in the water, and they got to see the burn. No, I don't sleep on planes. This is the trouble. I won't sleep on the plane. I will be awake. This is why I am considering trying to finding the money to upgrade to a business if it does cost about 250 quid, because it's a case of not in terms of how do I put this? It's a case of it's more space for me to work in. Because currently I'm exit row, which is plenty of space for me to put my legs around, but there's not much space for me to work in terms of table space. I'm really attracted by some of the flight airlines which have the option of being able to turn your business class seat to look out the window while working. That seems like a great idea to me. But, no. I don't think I can do that in the scenario I'm in. Would a 6 or 8 inch guns be more effective than 15 inch shore defense against trading hitting powerful rate of fire? You need to have both. Tends to be you have a few 15 inch gunships to make sure that an enemy battleship can't sit off the coast and just smash you. Colin Cameron, was it not the same? Not the same in terms of come up with pop-up hidden flamethrowers and other fun old one-times that designed the flame barrier? They were certainly part of the same group of thinkers, but they started out as a home guard project. It started out with a home guard, and then Churchill, yeah, got interested in it. Thank you, Nathan Wolfson. Funny bike, not a wolf Thomas Van Eld, Furry Kitten, Cedron 95's 27 Quintuple 5, Megascrow, then no, Gokbay, and all the others who've just got Jack Ray memberships. Thank you. Thank you, Jack Ray. Yes, and there is official film, and you still can't get Melanie. Oh. Still can't get Melanie. You're doing all this just to try and get Melanie. I don't know. At some point, it will work. At some point, you will get her. You will get her. Could the Japanese have taken the Philippines before the Americans during the Spanish-American War? Potentially, as the Japanese could bring battleships with them, they could have done. Potentially. But they would have to be part of the war from the get-go, and they'd have to mobilize before the war began. As our name is blue, it won't turn green. Yes. It won't turn green, no. Because green is memberships and blue are admins. We did a Naval History Conference in Greenwich. We have an inn called Gareth who would help us with hopefully setting that up. That would require Melanie to have the ability to accept memberships turned on. Mm-hmm. Okay, would you settle for naming a naval target ship HMS BT? I'm kidding, but the thought is potentially intriguing. It is interesting as an idea. Having a target ship as HMS BT. Doing something which he never did in life, improving the accuracy of warships. Very tempting. But how would World War II go if the US stayed neutral after it was forced out of World War I when it came in on the side of Germany? Well, that's an interesting scenario, because under that scenario, A, World War I has been pretty darn different. B, World War II would therefore be fairly different as well. You wouldn't have had the treaty scenario. You probably have had a very different Canada. Maybe even a very different Russia come out of it. I think, as we've discussed before, with that scenario, the most likely scenario of that actually happening results in a termination at next election when a new power, when another party comes to power, and they change over and change from being sort of change to being pro the UK and ending the war. So the question is going to be which party's in power, because if there's a party who was attacking who had the secret agreement, they might feel they have to enter the war on the British side to to make up for the fact of the secret agreement of the previous generation, and the other ones might feel they have to enter the war on the British side to preserve the peace they've built post it. So you're more actually likely to get America coming into the war sooner. By Martians, could the 9.2-inch 50 guns have been made to automatic loading like the 8-inch 55 guns on the Des Moines? Eventually, yes, if you develop the technology. Oh, sorry. There is the cheap fix of spray painting the name on a killer tomato. Oh shit, but still working on accuracy. Yep. I like killer tomatoes. Although you can do some very nasty damage to them with very small weapons. That's something. Formula 1 from Monaco's done. I'd better get some more Iron Brew done. Let me see, how much do I have in here? Do I have enough for Thursday? Let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I have enough for Thursday if I have one more. So, this is my last Iron Brew. You see, there are many people who seem to be upset with the fact that Biden has apparently, and I'm just going to, this is before I into US politics, has just visited his, I think his granddaughter's high school graduation and arrived in a helicopter. Now, let's put this the other way. A grandfather just turned up at his granddaughter's graduation / they're probably going to have a big party this evening, event, in a military-grade helicopter with a force, a small force of personnel which make most militaries look under-equipped. I'm not saying that many grandfathers would like to do this, but the options of turning up at their granddaughters ceremony so well equipped and emphasizing the point so much would surely appeal to them. It's one of those things of, I don't care if you think it's a lot of money. Any single grandfather worth their salt would love to emulate and do that. No, we're not surprised, thanks to everyone. We were actually shocked. I was actually checking you were okay. What effect would occur on battleship and battlecruiser development if all 50 Royal Navy pre-Dreadnought battle and semi-Dreadnoughts were 13.5-inch armed ships? Well, then Dreadnought would have been a 13.5-inch ship. And that would have been just that much bigger and scarier from the get-go. So it would have raised everything up. So you'd had the Orions would have probably been 15-inch armed ships. The Queen Elizabeth would have been 16.5-inch armed ships. That's just the options. That's just what would happen. Instead of 12-inch armed ships, 5 10-inch armed ships, and 8 13.5-inch ships, they would all be 13.5-inch guns, and so that would standardize on them. And then Dreadnought would be 13.5-inch guns. It would be a lot of 13.5-inch guns, and the British would have, logistically, would be a lot easier. Was the loading of the 8-inch 55 guns on Des Moines only auto around the guns, but not the shell handling room and powder room? Seems to be easier part of reloading process to automate. It was. Some of these things were assisted rather than automated, if that makes sense. And there is a definition of when it's mechanically assisted versus when it's automated. Actually, I admit I don't like Ben, but he's the president of the US. That's how it is. Yes, it should scare the scooters a bit. Let's put it that way. Yep. And that is the thing. If you know, that's how presidents are moved around for their safety, because it sounds terrible to say, but if something happens to them, that's a big problem. They rebuilt a couple of different types of British World War I flame projectors in 2020 for an archaeology project. They apparently scared the friggin' out of the serving army officers involved and made the retired NTOs helping laugh. Yep. They were all thinking, Geneva Convention, Geneva Convention, Geneva Convention. Oh, good lord, these people had no concept of the Geneva Convention. It didn't exist. They didn't care. So do you know anything of the proposed fighter variant of the Buccaneer? Do you think it would be any good? Not particularly, because the Buccaneer is a low-level strike aircraft which basically achieves stealth by flying not in the weeds but below the weeds. So, yeah, fighter variant probably not its best forte. Sorry, do you think do you think if the British had known how fast Nagatos were, that the N3 would have traded armor for some more speed? I'm not sure if it would have traded armor for some more speed, but I think they might have found a way to give it some more speed. So no, at that time was at that time was the Geneva Suggestions. As far as the Home Guard were concerned. When did air conditioning first appear across the ship, not just in magazines? The US Navy got there fairly early, but I think everyone else was a bit later. I think the US got there in... Ooh, when they electrified all their ships, which was probably... I think they were there for one of the Royal Jubilees. Sorry. This is going to sound terrible, but there is currently someone giving away some naval books on Twitter, and Shipshape, our little sort of group of the four of us, is currently having a discussion on WhatsApp, and it just flashed up because it was someone else working out whether or not we have time to acquire them, organize them, sort them before we go. I've said no, I don't. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. How would a unified NATO fleet look in the 1950s if they would use commonly designed naval ships? So design date 1950 after. Okay, so we're hand-waving the entire political discussion, etc. things. You're basically going to have a mixture of British and American designs because they're the ones who are providing the vast majority of them. So you're going to have the British light fleet carriers being a standardized form and development of the light fleet carrier. You're probably going to have the Midway continuation as being the standardized for the large fleet carrier because Britain's not building any large fleet carriers at that point. You would probably, cruiser-wise, American heavy cruiser, British light cruiser, probably. Because the British are still working on them. Destroyers and frigates. You see, the American destroyer leaders probably come in, but I would say the British probably win on the destroyer designs. So I'd say American destroyer leaders and British destroyer designs, probably the daring class expanded. And then you have frigates, and that's going to be a mess. They'll never be standardized. That'll just be standardized in terms of equipment, but not standardized in terms of build, because everyone will be wanting to build their own. I think, would it be fair to say that in an environment where at least 1 or 2 G3s are built, the Italians and French would have to look longer and harder at what they have? Not really. Because the French aren't building to fight the British, and the Italians, they're not at this point building to fight the British either. They're building to fight the French. So the Italians and French aren't going to worry about it. The British worry about the Italians, but the Italians don't worry about the British. Will I be making US Navy ice cream like Jack did? Not right now. Maybe when I get back. Oh, good. Enjoy Spain. And Steve Richards, where are you thinking of having this conference? Got to speak to my wife. Greenwich. Greenwich. It'll be in Greenwich. It'll be in the. If we get it, we hope to have it in the Old Naval College at Greenwich. That's what we're hoping for. What about battleships? Battleships would depend on, what exactly the Soviet Union is building. And I've just done a whole video about that, so I'm going to leave that one on sort of battleships for the combined force. But yeah, the main issue you'd have is that the Americans design their ships for a lot more crew than everyone else does, even at this time. Would you agree, Doc, that Drax videos getting in the hands of Jackie Fisher will not end well for anyone? Drax videos getting 790 pounds. I don't think either of our videos would be good for anyone if Jackie Fisher got hold of them. I think I'd end up with I'd end up with a left behind message for me to come to the future just to bonk me on the nose. I think Jackie Fisher has enough ideas of his own before you start adding in other people's ideas. Now, it falls apart as at the point because they can't agree if it's a destroyer, escort, or a frigate. It's interesting. You've told him the hood and G engine free, what hood and G3 entry will be, how all the ships they lose get sunk, and tell him the British Empire is not going to survive and what their rivals will do. Yeah, the videos, that would change some things. It would certainly change some things and some developments. Iron Productions. If the SR-177 had been chosen for Luftwaffe over the F-104 Starfighter, how do you think it would have fared in Fleet Air Arm Service? Would have been interesting. I think it might have killed less pilots. Tries not to want to yank the books, possibly just do them afterwards. What would be interesting, entertaining, if I showed up at Tank Fest with a case of books. If you showed up at Tank Fest with a case of books, you would probably be highly appreciated by at least one of the occupants of the car. Your Cold War era nightmare fuel made me reevaluate my childhood. It makes a lot of people reevaluate some little things. One of the things it does is make people reevaluate the idea that battleships were killed by World War II. Like my maximum, would a diesel Kriegsmarine have been even possible over a steam turbofleet? It's potentially possible. It's certainly they're laying the groundwork for it, so it's possible, but they need to develop it. Next one. Is it more likely that the conclusion that India was not ready for Dominion status had little to do with some things some like to think, but was really based on the need to build a lot of infrastructure and get systems up before India takes on the responsibility of being Dominion? In honesty, it's a mixture. There are certainly some people for whom it is everything bad we can imagine it to be. And in the case of others, it is because of they see the legacy of misrule and of problems that have been carried out, things which have been not been invested in, infrastructure-wise, etc., and that those need to be, before you hand that all over to a Dominion government, the British government should have said it right. And that's the reality of it. That's it. It's always a problem is that you can usually find far more easy to find the people who are in the former camp than the people who are in latter camp, because those people tend to be ferreted out and tend to be loud and obnoxious, whereas the people in the latter camp tend to be quieter, more numerous, and less likely to be ferreted out for special attention because they fit with what most people are happy. Assurance, what needs to change to make the Commonwealth the third big player bloc in the post-World War II world? A concerted effort by all political parties therein to make it so. It would have to be the ascribed goal. Actually, I worked out my family buys 120 books a month on average. On grounds that it might incriminate me and that family members watch these videos, I am not going to answer any questions along the lines of how many books I buy a month. As an individual, or as a historian, or as a combined total of those and reference books. Night ticket, everyone. For starters, why have you given the Japanese the same size fleet as the as the Americans and the Royal Navy? And if you're doing, I'm not sure what you've gone into this. You've gone into a Washington ships. So that's Washington ships is a specific thing. That says you described a treaty. And so if you're talking about the ships that were under construction, the British would have been built far more as well. I'm also not sure where you've got 7 battle cruisers and 14 battleships from. I presume that's the G-Freeze and Renown, Repulse and Hood and the N-Freeze, but you've also forgotten Tiger, which would be 8th battle cruiser and probably would have stayed in service for quite a bit longer until she's replaced. You've also forgotten the King George V's. They would also be around, and the RN would probably be replacing those as well. And also, let's be honest, the Americans and the Japanese are ordering and planning theirs a lot further in advance. The British are announcing their next generation are going to be the G-Freeze, and the ones they're going to build that year. The year after that, they're going to build the N-Freeze. They haven't told you what they're going to build in 2 years' time or in 3 years' time. They've told you what they're ordering this year, what they're ordering next year. They haven't told you what they're ordering the year after that. Whereas the Americans and the Japanese have to an extent done that. And the Japanese ones, the number 13 battleships are so long way off they haven't even conceived the engines yet. Thank you, Vernon. The 13.5-inch ships will get done, but what they get replaced by is a different matter. Alex Clarke purchases equal to or greater than 5 books per month. That statement is not factually incorrect. Doctor, if you're stated, Doctor, if someone knows your state relation to money, you seem to have acquired a lot of expensive habits. Let's put it this way: I do not really have a social life, so that is how I afford these things, and those are, of course, months where I get paid. It's like this month where they've paid me half. They promised the next half is coming on Tuesday. We'll see if it actually turns up, but they paid me half my pay. Well, that's going to affect what books I'm going to buy. But then there are other months where I get the full pay, and then once I put the money aside, I need to put into various things, pension and those sort of scenarios. And once I've got enough money to sort of live off for the next month, stacked away, and maybe paid off some of my credit card debt, which builds up to cover when they forget to pay me completely, I then buy books. And it's always the priority of books is always this, is books needed for work are first. Then it's books which are for reference, so general knowledge works. Then it's books which are fiction ones which I'd quite like to read. And then it's sort of other things which are retreats for me. And it's basically wherever the money runs out on the list, the money runs out. So that's the scenario. I budget and budget and budget. That's the only way I can survive. Only way I can keep things going in a situation that I regularly find myself in, thanks to the universities. And the thing is, I do quite well on that. I'm quite good at budgeting. I'm quite good at automatically. One of the things I always do is I always round up the price of it. I always round down my income and round up the cost of everything. That's my first starting point to avoid getting into trouble. I round down what I have and round up what I'm getting, the cost of what I'm buying. Always. Which means I always budget more than I need to pay for something. And I always budget based on less than I'm likely to earn. It prepares you. Senior Richards, the World War R class submarines and submarines, if kept around, would they be viable in the World War II? Could be. Okay, if you somehow manage to find their way to maintain their whole life, so they can still be viable, yes. But their whole life is going to be the issue. Shurmak, which interwar fleet do you think could have been the most beneficial from hindsight we have benefited the most from the hindsight we have the most? Honestly, the Royal Navy, and the reason I say that is because the Royal Navy needs to fight in so many theatres, they need to make so many decisions, they need hindsight. I think the first thing they'd have done is Nelson and Rodney they'd have used the extra 1,200 odd so tons and made sure they got 1,200 tons and made sure they got a third shaft and the required engines to get them up to 28 plus knots. What if the program starts the Tube Allies program starts a few years earlier? Get serious investment, not quite Manhattan Project, but getting there into that scenario, and provided no one sits on their hands, could Britain get the H-bomb at the same time or as even before the US? And so, what is the ultimate impact? If Britain got such a bomb earlier, or the same time as the US, the question is, do they use it? And who do they use it on? Because it's a really interesting thing if the British decide to use it on Germany. Because where do they hit in Germany? And there's a far bigger problem if they do hit Germany than if they hit other places, because it's not surrounded by seawater, and it's not several thousand miles from any Allied territory. So there are issues. That's right. 4 G3, 1 Hood, 2 Renowns. Tiger would have been retired from this. Are justified in the front line after G3s. Not really, because they do different roles. One's a battle crew. One in that scenario, Tiger becomes a battle cruiser. 2 words. It becomes part of the economic warfare machine. So, if you imagine 4 G3s are what you put in the Indian Ocean to deal with the Japanese and the threat from there, Tiger, Renowns, and Hood are based in the home fleet and are operating out in the Atlantic. Tiger is fine for dealing with the threats you're going to find in the Atlantic and either dodging them or for fighting them. See, Clarke, talking of following designs for N3 G3, is there any indication in Arcos what you found as to what? There are some ideas, but also it depends on when the British government do the infrastructure refit. If they do it, the basic point is, will the government start the infrastructure refit after the end of freeze? In which case, that you can change your design again. Will the Royal Australian Navy have been larger than the Royal Navy? That would require a growth in Australian population and economics. But it also could, if the Australian government decide that they are really committed to it, yes, it could happen even without those things. But there again, that's suggesting that the Royal Navy is not, the British government are not reacting to the same issue and not growing the Royal Navy as well, if they are in that scenario. Night to everyone, is it correct that what killed Habakkuk in the end was material needed to being needed elsewhere? Escort carrier production, lack of a shipyard strong enough, big enough to build it. Basically, it's the last two more than the material being needed elsewhere. They could have found them, not necessarily so to make enough pie creep without too much effort. You have a social life, otherwise you would have been left to fend off the emu and kangaroo by yourself. I would say, as a rule, and they're great, but we don't socialise enough for it to be considered a social life. We talk a lot, we plan these things, we work together, we love working here, we're good friends, but yeah, we don't go out to drink events, we drinks in the evenings or things like that. We don't meet up for meals on random occasions. When Glyn was over here, we got together. But, you know, we're all quite busy. You know, we've got, at least, all 4 of us are workaholics of varying degrees. So, yeah, that is sort of, to an extent, that's the sort of the thing, is that the trips are, to an extent, our social life for the entire year. And they are mostly work. They're a lot of fun, but they're work. We enjoy working, but they're work. And so, how scary would Nelson have been if she had been faster and by late war had 9 6-inch guns, 12 5.25 inch, 12... Why would you have both 5.25 and 4.5 inch? Why would you have both? You'd have one or the other. Because you don't need 12 5.25 and 12 4.5. You need either... Well, I would say you need 16 of one or 16 of the other. Lighter anti-aircraft battery of 48 pom-poms, 72 bowfills, and 61 oriclone. If you have all that, that's great. And yeah. Again, though, why would you have both bowfills and pom-poms? Why? You'd have one or the other. Ammunition for the basic starters point, you don't want that getting mixed up. All sorts of problems if you have 48 and 72 of one, 48 of one, 72 of other. You'd have one or the other. So you stand nice. Or is it? Did they ever consider an RN Tornado? I'm sure at some point they did, but they realized very quickly that its frame and its whole undercarriage just weren't suitable to the role. By going, if the US kept all the Mexico after Mexican-American War, does the UK start to fortify Canada? Probably not. But they do probably... they don't fortify Canada, but they might well do something interesting things in Halifax. And possibly across the other side. We are your social life. Yes, you are my social life. Chatting with people on YouTube is my social life. And Discord. You really are my social life. That is very, very scary. But yeah, that is. You are my social life. What are the functional limits of wooden aircraft, and would they be more useful to countries like Japan? There are some limits, but it's not as massive as you'd think, and honestly, if you have the skills, you can churn out some very good aircraft. The main trouble with wooden aircraft and the glue which holds them together, lamination, etc., is that, making it work in hot climates. And not making it sweat apart. Night Heron Productions. Okay, that's the A-bomb. What would the British get? What would about the British getting the H-bomb prior to the US, detonated by Ivy Mike in 1952? How does that affect Britain's post-war status and position at all? It raises it and probably causes some issues, but it's more a case of, wow, our ally is really, really frigating powerful. Oh, frigate. We talk about Tiger, Lion, Queen Mary, Invincible. We never talk about Princess Royal. Why? Because, honestly, as great a ship as she was, and she was a pretty cool ship. And I do have her notes usually organised. She gets forgotten. She gets overlooked over a bit. And she shouldn't be, but she does. Basically because she survives, and she's the second of the 2 Lion-class battlecruisers. So usually when you're talking about the Lions, you automatically include her. So that's her problem, because she is the second of Lion-class battlecruisers. But she's a good ship. I have just been sent a message. Will I please go check that the greenhouse door is closed? And I will do. I'm not putting my socks on though, so I'm not going to shoes on, so I'm not going to roll. Oh, right. That was a bit fun. So, the Delta Command supposed to have 6-inch 50 Mark 22 and 4.7-inch 40 Mark 8, replaced by 5.2 No, they weren't. I'm not sure whether you've heard that, but they weren't getting it replaced by the 5.25 inch replacing the 6 inch, and the 4.7 inch replacing the 4.5 inch replacing the 4.7 inch. They were going to either get the 5.25 or the 4.5. They weren't going to. Let's put it this way. You do not. The 4.7 inch is an AA gun. The 6 inch is an anti-surface weapon. You do not then replace them with two types of dual purpose and have to deal with all the issues that come from that. You standardise on one or the other. And the British are not going to be entering into that joy in something which is the shape and issues of a Nelson class. So no, they would have been getting. I have the sneaking suspicion they'd have got the 5.25 if they'd have been going to get them, because that is the slightly better anti-surface weapon of the two options. And you are replacing 6-inch guns. But I have a feeling that you get 4 twin turrets on either side. Going back to my TSR question, if the supersonic Balakini had been pursued, could it have fit in the RN carriers? Would there have been any interest from Navy if such variant got built? Yeah, they accommodated the Phantom. That was pretty flat. And the Buccaneer too, and yeah, they'd have been interested in it. But how much do things change if the UK bought the F-14 when it came out in the 1970s? Well, let's put it this way. If they're getting the F-14 in the 1970s, that's because they've got something like the CVA-01 being built. Because they've got which means they've built the CVA-01 to a standard it can take aircraft of the weight of the F-14. And that's going to change things dramatically from the get-go. So, yeah, the world gets very different under those circumstances. Probably you're looking at a F-14 Buccaneer strike group, which would be an interesting formation to have. No, they wouldn't have both. So even if they have a second major problem, if they have that battery, that sort of dual-purpose battery, it would improve their capabilities in dealing with aircraft in places like the Mediterranean. Yes. I don't know. 1740 B-29 was funded at 158% of the Manhattan Project funding. Yep, that would work. Colin Cameron, if after the Act of Union, the UK had kept hold of a Panama and restarted the Panama and restarted the canal project when it was possible, do you think this would have affected US fleet makeup? I think it would have made the US very, very worried about the British control of the Panama Canal Zone. And the British would have had to be very careful, but probably would have just gone on with it and gone, right, you really want to fight a war with us over this? And it would probably be the case that the Americans would go, well, we could fight a war, but it wouldn't go well for us, so we won't. But it would be interesting. It would give the British a lot of control over the global economy. And the US Navy might decide that they don't need their battleships to be limited by Panama constraints in order to be built. But that means they wouldn't be able to go through the Panama Canal, so even if they're allied, they wouldn't be able to put their ships through there. What we never sloops to discuss. We tend to think of ASW. Was there anything similar for anti-air warfare where they stuck with destroyers? No, sloops did anti-air warfare as well. They also could get radars fitted and had their 4-inch guns, so they would do air warfare. They were not, but destroyers tended to have more firepower than most sloops did. Diamond Maximus. Pre-London Treaty, submarines were only held to the 10,000 ton limits. If using technical submarines, what class or class submarines would you design with the full tonnage? Designing a 10,000 ton submarine in the 1920s tech. Well, for starters, that thing is going to be frigging huge. It's going to be big. Honestly, it's got to be a cruiser submarine of some kind. But basically, at that point, you are probably bringing drop-down turrets inside the hull and putting the hull, an outer hull over them to keep them dry. Although they won't come inside the pressure hull, but you know, the turret will be a sort of on an extendable barbette scenario. Dr. Clarke, I've been playing too much World of Warships. It's not realistic carriers are too robust. How effective were secondary batteries, and how vulnerable were battleships and cruisers to them? Not as vulnerable as sometimes World of Warships like to make out. And honestly, you prefer not to get involved in that kind of fight. It's one of the things I find interesting when people turn around to me with the grass up and go, yes, but she would have had an excellent secondary battery, so she could have fought another aircraft carrier off. So going, yeah, under what scenario does she end up fighting another aircraft carrier solo? Even the blooming scenario with Glorious where she's off on her frigating own because an admiral agrees with her captain who's just making silly decisions after silly decisions. And you sit there and go, well, yes, that's all that's happening, and that's very true. But, and I say this in the nicest way, and I mean this in the nicest way, she still had 2 destroyers with her. In what world does the Graf Zeppelin manage to fight off both destroyers launching torpedoes at her when we consider how maneuverable the Graf Zeppelin was? But guys, if the US Congress didn't hate the Navy and gave them the Navy money to have a decent sized Navy after the Civil War, how would that change things? It would probably make the US Navy one of the 2 powers the Royal Navy's building against. Honestly, that's the likely outcome. Because they could be pretty darn big and they could justify it. And the British wouldn't mind that because it would give them a major power that they could play off against the French. Because the American and the French alliance is always an interesting one. Because the French always expect the Americans to do what they tell them to because they are the old, mature power. And the Americans always have a fiercely independent streak and expect the French to do what they ask them to because usually they are the larger power. And it just gets interesting. When the Americans actually invest, the Americans tend to be the larger power. Sorry. Life, love and history, but I was turning on the light because we're getting it a bit dark. Just a tad dark. Just a tad. Hey. Just a tad dark. Hey, sorry, organising things so I can get to keyboard. Right then, and I'm just imagining a 10,000 ton mine laying submarine with 1,000-pound charged mines. There's lots and lots of that thing would be able to do whatever it wanted to do. And what happens if in the early 20th century the US and UK signed a defence pact and remained steadfastly committed to it? i.e. there's rather like the Anglo-Japanese, there's an Anglo-American alliance. That changes World War One. It changes pretty much everything, because World War One, that means the Americans probably get involved straight away if they're steadfastly committed to it, and they would probably do a joint action in World War One, and in World War Two, it means they get into it again straight away. So it changes your connections. Firepower plus production equals battleship. Firepower plus speed equals destroyer. Maybe carrier protection equals protection plus speed. You could make that case. Do you know what Eric Brown's thoughts were on supersonic carrier? He liked the idea. What are your thoughts on it? It could have been very useful. Could it have compared to the F4s the Iron eventually got? Potentially, yes. Dawson, an Italian cruiser came second in dual veterans Formidable. To be fair, Formidable was at that time backed up by 3 battleships. And a very confused Commander-in-Chief Mediterranean Fleet going, "What are you doing here?" You know, that's what he was doing at the time. He was going, "No. No, you're not supposed to be here. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it." But life often gets like that. You know, when you're around British carriers, they like to move. They really do like to move. Georgian, 950 in a gun. Yep, getting a bit dark. I found out some modernization proposal with 12 underwater warships foreign post. Yeah, I've looked at the modernization discussions in the National Archives. The options there are sometimes options of 12 or 5.25 or 12 4.5, either or. It would be kind of either. You know, either you get one or the other, and I've seen others which have had 16 5.25 and 16 12.5, 16 4.5. I think myself the 5.25 is the most likely, but I'd say the 16 4.5 is then most likely after that. And I'd say there is a good option for the 16 4.5, especially once they have the production up and running. But there is no... Okay, let's put it this way. Why, when you can simplify your ammunition handling, your organization, and also think about this, they're not really designed for deck space, because the 4.7-inch guns are single guns mounted on decks, whereas the 6-inch guns are in twin turrets. So that's not a good... How are you going to put in all those different guns? Space-wise, efficiency-wise, engineering-wise, you can't. Then you got crewing all those different guns. That's not gonna. That's gonna have to maximize space. So you can't do that. And you've got all the magazine storage for it. It's not going to work. You're going to go with one or the other. One or the other. So you're either going to replace the twin 6-inch turrets with 5.25-inch guns or 4.5-inch guns. And I think in that space you can replace them with 4 turrets either side, but you know, perhaps you can, perhaps it's 6, and maybe you put in a hangar facility aft. There is options, but no, you're not going to be putting both. There's just not the space. And by God, how would things change if the US turtle was successful during the Revolutionary War? Well, there are some people going to write off as a one-off, but then there are people who are going to have to start working out how to deal with it, and there's going to be a whole load of solutions. But basically, I would see it as probably ships employing nets. Kind of like anti-torpedo nets. When they were stationary in harbour, they deploy anti-submersible nets. That's right. Alt history, fantasy one, service charges, and submarine inverted depth charge. We tend to call that a mine. Okay, Trouble Captain got hold of a carrier. A few did, disturbing enough. Vian got hold of entire carrier fleet. That's a Foxer. Is there a way the RN IGN get into a carrier versus carrier gun duel during the Indian Ocean raid? If so, how does it go? Basically, you need both carriers to somehow gone off from their fleets to have been doing air operations, have got sufficiently far away from their fleets that they managed to bumble into each other without being in sight of their fleets, and then it's a bang 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 scenario. But several points they can launch aircraft, so they'd both have to launch their aircraft and not be able to recover their strikes. So it's just no, there's so much hand waving involved. You're not dealing with alternate history, you're dealing with a sequence of illogical events. What's your opinion of the Fairy Firefly? It had potential. And it was a fairly reliable aircraft. That's around. No, Blackburn Maximus. What? How would Hitler react if Deutschland had been sunk by RN heavy cruisers in the opening stage of World War II in 1939? Absolute abject horror. Totally. The Royal Navy just sunk Germany. No, Knight 6831, I will go further than that. It was never an idea. I've read the papers. At no point have I seen someone put forward the idea of let's put on 24 dual-purpose weapons, 12 of one type and 12 of the other type, in 8 turrets, in what would be, let's see, 12 turrets. No. The maintenance, all the other issues, no one's going there. I can imagine it being a choice of 12 5.25 inch or 12 4.5 inch, but no one is going to put both on a single ship. Logistics, maintenance, crewing, all those requirements and issues, no, it doesn't work. It wouldn't be what's done. So at no point, it's not going to be an early idea, it's just not going to be the option pursued. Alex, if the Iron got a 4.7 inch dual purpose mount to warn in single and double turret mounts, Would all the Iron ships being refitted them to all ships as either primary for their destroyers or secondaries for the cruiser capital ships? Probably. It would have been a good one to standardise on. Night Secretary for one. Just because they don't have super retards doesn't mean anything. It can change far quicker, so the British will keep a presence in the Falkland Islands. Actually, let me try again. VLS torpedoes. Well, that's VLS torpedoes. Anton Avaga. How do things change if submarine wasn't invented? Someone has to try really, really hard to make certain things work. Because, let's be honest, torpedoes stop to work at the point at which you have torpedo boat destroyers. They're still powerful, they're still there, but they're not the all-dominating weapon they are presumed to be, and a submarine allows them to recapture that for a while. So basically you end up with having to develop something else to replace the torpedo as that primary killing weapon. Is it fair to suspect that the fire control system the Soviet Union nicked from the Revenge-class Super Dreadnought Royal Sovereign was her Type 282 pom-pom fire control radar and Type 283 fire control radar? Yeah, but they of course didn't get given the... Let's put it this way, the versions they got were not really the best the British could produce. I can't think why, but the British weren't always that trustworthy on that scenario, trusting on that scenario. They just weren't. It's terrible to say, but they weren't. ASROC is a basically torpedo fired from a VLS tube with the assistance of a rocket, and so lofted by rocket to where it's the rocket or missile body to where it's needed to be dropped, and then dropped into water. I wonder if the Stalingrad class being built. I wonder about RM battleships being built with quick-firing 6-inch gun Mark N5 twin turrets secondaries. Probably. Hold on. RIP my power? What's happened? You okay? Puts the crimping in dinner plans. That would. It would put a crimping in dinner plans. But again, do you think the US should have built their treaty carriers with an armoured deck with a loss of aircraft capacity like the RN or did they choose the right way to with airplane almost over armour? Look, the USN are choosing what's right for them, the Royal Navy are choosing what's right for them, but if anything tells you that both are choosing based on treaty restrictions rather than what their heart really desires, it's called the Midway class and it's called the Malta class. Because in the Malta class you see both armour and space for all those aircraft, and in the Midways you see armour and all the space for all those aircraft. So basically, both are having to make a compromise, and which they think is the better compromise for their scenario. For the British, looking at going around the world the way they're going around the world, with the North Sea, Mediterranean, and South China Sea en route, as well as the Atlantic and Indian Ocean and the Pacific, they've gone for armoured carriers, which have sacrificed some of their air group size for armour capacity. If you're American and you're going across the Pacific, they've gone, well, we're going to be able to pick and choose when we go into the range of land-based aircraft at all times, so we can just go for the largest air complement we can get and hope they work. Was any thought ever given to removing the main battery on a battleship and packing on 4.7-inch 20mm and 40mm guns, especially turning the giant flak batteries as solid protection? There are some ships which go very similar routes to that for gunnery training, but not really as a serious weapon of war. Nicerin, would it be fair to say the Sovietsky Soyuz class would have been victim of nothing happens in isolation? There would have been a response, yes. In your opinion, what would an acceptable escort for Glorious? She should have probably tacked onto the heavy. She should have capped onto the heavy cruise. In which case, there'd been a heavy cruiser and about 4 destroyers, and her together in the group that's taking back the King and Queen of Norway. And then there had also been an admiral there who would have been going, "Where is my air cover? Put loft aircraft up. I want to know what's going on around me." At which point, the Sharnos and Eisenhower get spotted a lot further away, and so you can make a call for whatever to come assist. And also, you've got a heavy cruiser and you've got 4 destroyers with you, as well as aircraft operating. And you spot them from further away. So in a nice way, you have time, you can move, you can divert away, and you can also call in things like Renown, which will come charging up, going, "Hello!" So yeah, very easy change, a very simple maneuver, something which the Admiral should have been considering. Would have changed the whole fate of Glorious. Deutschland tonight. I wrote a bit where the RN converted sovereigns into troop ships with only heavy artillery. Deutschland chased off by salvos of 12-inch fire. Headline: Lord Nelson trumps Germany at sea. Blackburn Maximus. MCU-4 helps the 4th destroyer flotilla in a boarding action, successfully capturing Bismarck. What kind of information can be taken from it, and could the British tow the ship back to the UK? Yes, the British could tow it back to the UK. With the presence of submarines in the region, they might not want to. They might be worried about it. But they could tow it back to the UK if they've got it with the help of 4. And probably he could electrify the water and prevent any submarines getting close by. So, you can deal with things like that. And then, well, what kind of information could they learn from it? Probably to learn how inefficient German ship design is, but they could also accurately go through various German systems and codes, especially if they managed to capture it and capture the people. They could interrogate them and learn a lot that way. And maybe they'd learn about German high-pressure steam and go, you know what, we were sensible not doing this. What would most likely be the retirement schedule for World War I Japanese ships, as the 4 Yamato and 1 Yamato Kai would replace Tunagota, Ise, and Fuse? Basically, expect to see them the transition taking place between 1943 and 1947 to maybe as late as 1949. Was Weber the primary driver to your inversion deck parking on vulnerability land-based aircraft? Vulnerability land-based aircraft was a consideration, but yes, the RN had lost quite a lot to large waves. The RN had lost quite a lot of aircraft to large waves. This has made them worry about it. If one's operating in the North and South Atlantic on a regular basis, and the North Sea, one gets accustomed to very large waves and building and designing ships around them. Okay, how do you see things going if older US battleships go to intercept Yamato instead of the carrier aircraft? Well, if the battleships they had were there, they weren't that old. But if you tell me if you rig up the old battleships of the fire support line, and they go, well, the thing is, Yamato was designed to fight two of them, but they weren't designed. She wasn't designed to fight 4 or 5 of them. And they've been upgraded. They've got radar. They've got things on them to give them more accurate fire control. So, yeah, it's not going to be good. The point I often make about ship's armor is it's designed to take the first round hit, but it's not designed to take the second hit. So, yeah. Karen, my wife, wants to know how the conference will be held. I think the plan is it will be held over a weekend. And I think it would be. There are various plans we're looking at for doing that, and it's going to be a fun conference. We've got all sorts of plans for putting it together. I was looking. Has the RN ever tested a constant carrier operation doctrine in a carrier battle? They've never had the opportunity to fight against another carrier in that scenario, because the Germans and Italians didn't produce any, and the Operation C they didn't actually strike, didn't hit, didn't find them, and the Japanese left the Indian Ocean. But I would say the closest proximity you can find it are the convoy battles of World War II, and that does show its virtue and its capabilities. In terms of its defensive capabilities. Not necessarily its offensive capabilities, but they're used as well in some of the convoy battles. Understood. How does German high-pressure steam compare with later USN 1200 PSI steam plants? The USNs was more sensibly organised and made more, were definitely organised better. And that was in the US's own words, let alone Britain's words. Britain was ruder. Dr. Clarke, in a world where iron ships have personalities, and who do you have an iron brew with? Well, I'd like to have an iron brew of HMS Warrior for starters, but that would just because she's just fun. But I think I'd probably want to hang around the destroyer crews. Mainly from the point of view of it would just be fun to watch the destroyer ships, just fun to watch them charge at anything which is just annoying them. Their single mode response to any situation. You cause trouble, charge! I don't like you, charge! You serve me bad food, charge! It'd just be fun to watch. Don't worry, large waves scary. When they nick planes off your flight deck, yes, they are scary. Nice predictions. Supersonic Buccaneer versus TSR-2. Which do you think would be more sensible project to pursue for the specification? Probably the Supersonic Buccaneer. Hijack Ray? Yeah. And then... Oh, what's that one? Did the RN build a warship reliable and ease of maintenance in mind? Pretty much all their warships are built with that in mind, especially the ones which in interwar years are built to operate on the other side of the world. That's basically factored into them, and that's one of the reasons why Britain makes decisions it does about boilers, etc. Because the British could have pushed ahead with higher pressure boilers, but they couldn't make them as straightforward to maintain as they could have other boilers they were making at the time. Yawning again. Instead of how the Hood blew up, to have debates about how the Bismarck was invincible because it took an Asgardian to take her, and we all be face palming over that instead. Mm-hmm. Jack, right? Wait, waves USRRN. It was large wave. It was the Royal Navy, and waves took aircraft. It's basically one of the reasons why the Royal Navy goes with the such form of carrier it does, and doesn't like deck edge lifts because they worry about the waves nicking their aircraft. It was Wrens for Royal Navy, if you're thinking about that, yes. But going to how much did a submarine warfare get if the teardrop hull form was around for World War II? Or the homing torpedo came out early in the war? Well, the homing torpedo, as I'll be talking about in a video coming up on the WATU, the Western Approaches Tactical Unit, is not the killing, necessarily the all singing, all dancing, all conquering weapon it's sometimes made out to be. And although it would have been interesting earlier in war, I think they still managed to develop candles for it. And as for the teardrop hull form, that's a great idea until you realise that provides you with very little stability on the surface. In which case, if you consider most of the submarines used in World War II and in World War One, in fact all the ones in World War One and most of the ones used in World War Two, are more submersible torpedo boats than they are actually submarines. In that we think of a submarine as something which goes and stays underwater. They were something which spent a large amount of time travelling on top of the water, as they could move them far more quickly and far easier on top of the water than they could beneath it. Teardrop hull's not a good position, and not a good design for that. Everyone, I'd love to have a brew with Victory. The old girl might act like a old fart, but she'd have lots of stories about the ships she's seen come and go, and could talk about Nelson and Fisher aboard her. True. And St. Vincent, yes. If World War II delays, how likely is it the US would still be operating the Devastator alongside Dauntless and World War II? Given like them, the British Empire has to replace a load of obsolete aircraft. Not very likely, because the USN does like to do whole force updates on a regular basis. So, was there any ideas to navalize the ferry battle, and would have been any use to fleet iron? Not really, and probably not, because what do they use it for? That's the thing. What anti-ship weapons can it carry? Can it carry the big bombs that the Skua can? Or can it carry the torpedoes the Swordfish and Albacore can? If it can't, then it's not much use. What's the difference between a tender and a repair ship? A tender tends to have accommodations and facilities aboard to support the flotilla. So basically a tender is a one-stop shop for all the logistical and all the needs of the flotilla. Whereas a repair ship is literally that, a repair ship. Sharnos versus Strasbourg. Who wins? Strasbourg. She's armed with 8 13-inch guns. Strasbourg is a fairly scary design. And remember, she can just point her nose at you and come at you from that direction, and then you know, you suddenly have to concentrate your fire far more, and it's far more difficult to give it the arranging. So, didn't the R-class subs from World War I have a teardrop hull? They had a teardrop inflection to their hull, but that was also part of the reason for their anti-submarine role. But it was also one of the reasons why they weren't maintained, was it was very difficult for them to be used in peacetime, justified in peacetime, because of the difficulty of operations. I think, from memory. There was consideration of a Gloucester meteor onto a carrier. I think what's his name? Winkle Brown did the testing. So what if World War II does not happen until the hour unexpected? What replaces Backbone Skew and Dive on Roll and Backbone Rock and Gloucester Sea Gladiator? Well, the Skewer's replaced by the Barracuda, which is supposed to do torpedo and dive bomber strikes. The Royal Navy gets a single-seat fighter, which will probably be the Supermarine Seafire. And they probably get a reconnaissance /searching light strike aircraft. Support a long-range fighter for other roles as well, which will probably be at some point procured. Rebecca, Shan has a better armor and the same speed. Dunkirk has 13-inch guns, has fairly decent armor, and frankly, yeah, I'd say her. Because of her design layout, because of her organisation, and because of the redundancy of her design. And it's going to sound strange, but Dunkirk can maintain her speed better than Strasbourg. Strasbourg can maintain the speed better than Scharnhorst in heavy waves, etc. So more often than not, it's going to favour her, because their likely engagement range, if you think about it, is not going to be the Mediterranean. Their likely engagement range is going to be the North Atlantic. In which case, the vessel which is the better seakeeping is going to have an advantage. And I'm also not that sure about the claims about the Scharnhorst armor being better quality than the Dunkirks and Strasbourg. It's probably about even quality, and that's even including the fact that it's slightly thicker. Mainly because the Germans had huge trouble getting their ship armor production facilities up and running again at the level they needed to produce them. And I'll be going in a couple of minutes because, well, I keep yawning, so I'm going to go and get some snooze. I've got a lot more videos to record tomorrow. But guys, do you think Admiral Lee was right by not engaging the Japanese in a night engagement after the carrier battle of the Philippine Sea? I think in those scenarios you tend to go with a person on the spot and their decision making. As much as we might like to have seen it and might like to have been able to read about it and talk about it, throwing away your force and lives needlessly is always something to be abhorred and avoided. Nighthawk productions. Mortars are built and get rebuilt in the 50s and 60s. Going in the mid-70s, what are their weapons fits, i.e. guns and missiles? What can you place on them? Probably their guns and missiles are Seawolf? Maybe they've got Seawolf if they're late 70s. It's kind of mid-70s, yeah, they could have got sort of version of Seawolf. And 3-inch guns. Plus a load of 40mm probably. That's right. How does Dudley Pound's brain tumor affect his decisions? I don't know. look, you can't tell how the brain tumour affects decisions. Not unless you're there observing a person, you can't. It's all wild conjecture. Because the brain tumour might have had no effect on his decision-making process. It might have completely corrupted it. We don't know. He seems to make more right decisions than he makes wrong decisions, so I'd say he's doing okay. Yes, he does make some big wrong decisions, but he does a lot of right decisions as well. Now, sorry, would the RAF hogging up Spitfire and targeting British constantly stalling the Iron have come to head before 1942 when they thought war would start? Basically, the RAF's hogging and Hurricane and Spitfire production is based on war starting in 1939. That's where a lot of it dies. If war doesn't start till 1942, then they don't really get the same dominance that they claim. Could the unrotated projectile be modified as anti-sub rockets with depth charges and magnetic detonators? Not really. They're not really designed for that one. And John UK, on the unlikely chance that Marshall isn't sacked and commands Operation Ryan instead of Lutyens, how does this change the Battle of Denmark Strait? Probably not much in the Battle of Denmark Straits, but I wouldn't be surprised if Marshall does a repeat of what he did in Wilsberg campaign, which is basically, you have to remember at this point, and he'd also commanded Operation Berlin. He'd have basically had to have withdrawn after he'd won this battle, because that was his policy. He would go and attack, destroy something British, and then then withdraw. So he'd have destroyed and sunk, possibly even chased the Prince of Wales, which would have not been sensible, and then would have withdrawn home as quickly as he could to live and fight another day, and caused Churchill a lot of trouble. It would have caused a lot of... The British would have been throwing everything out to catch them. Clarke Cameron, you have said in the past, if the war in the Far East had happened in the early 50s, you would expect the Italians and Germans to join in. Yes. Given the way of life of the wear of life of Italian guns, except for short sorties of men, at which place do you think the RM would make space for the Reggio Marina maintenance crew? Hong Kong, if they're lucky. Way Highway, most likely. They can buy it. Thank you, Glufkov. Thank you, Tanner Falca. Thank you, Mark Harness. Thank you, Night Heron Productions. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Colin Cameron. Thank you, Melanie1640. Thank you, Runon. Thank you, Anook. Thank you, Just Funk. Thank you, Sean Mack. Thank you, Stafford Thompson. Thank you, Paul from Chicago. Thank you, everyone who's been watching. Thank you, Stephen Richards. Who invented the home beacon used by British carriers in World War II? It was an Admiralty Research Office in conjunction with I think it's the Farnborough Aircraft Establishment, Aero Establishment, and they basically developed it in the mid-1930s. Early to mid-1930s. Early mid-1930s it's possible, but the version that we see on carriers in World War II is mid-1930s. Thanks, Josh Ray. Thank you, Abzaski. Thank you. Ooh. Thank you, Steve Clarke. Thank you, DJ40. Thank you, History Vanguard. Thank you, Bugguy869. Thank you, Megascrow. Thank you, Dream UK. Thank you, Edges Verdun, Calvin Gosberg, and Desert Foxo, Steve Richards, and Alt92. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. And I will see you for the last live before I go away on Thursday, when I have booked all my taxi, etc. And yes, I'm hoping the glorious 1st of June is not a 4-hour live, because I will need to be leaving here at about 7:15 in the morning in the taxi to get to the airport on time, and then from the airport I get to be there with roughly 2 hours before the plane takes off, so I have plenty of time to make sure I make the gate, etc. Get through all the customs. Get to the plane. And go fly. It'll be fun. Take care, George Newman. Thank you, Ruhan. Thank you very much, Maximus. Thank you, Joseph Rav. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, Ravu. I'm just finishing for the night, but hope you enjoyed, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Peter Olsen. Thank you, everyone. Take care. And see you Thursday evening for the last live before we go.